By the early 1970s,
So, for today, as you can probably see, we're going to be talking about an interesting collection of things. I do want to make one thing clear. Shia Islam, I mean, not necessarily, I should say, not necessarily. I'm sure there are connections that can be made between Shia Islam, right, Al Mahdi, and Joseph Smith. I'm sure people have made those connections before. Um, but we're going to be talking a bit about the Islamic Revolution in Iran. We're going to be talking a little bit about Shia Islam, so that way people can kind of know a little bit more about it. And we're also going to talk about, again, looking at the cynical historians, because this is part of his area of expertise. And so I really wanted to go into sort of the founding of Utah, but also the way how the Mormon religion, sort of the Latter-day Saints religion, right, really came to be. So, but yes, I want to. Okay, there we go. So first video that we're gonna look at. I hope everyone's doing well. Hope everyone that needs to lurk is lurking. So this, I am saying this right now. This is for educational purposes. Because it is. It actually is, though. But you know, can't be too safe these days.
Iran is changing fast. Back in 1953, the United States helped the Iranian monarch, the Shah Mohammad Pahlavi, in a coup.
Oh my gosh! Yesterday it was audio things. Now it's visual. It's come on, OBS, give me a break, just once, please. Like, there we go. Okay, there we go. Now you can see. I mean, actually, slightly. No problem. Wiggler over here. Transition back. Okay, we're good. Audio is a bit unbalanced too. Is something too loud or is something too low? Every day it's more of these issues. But I mean, they're perennial.
Against a pro-parliamentary faction. From then on, the country becomes a key ally in American Cold War strategy. U.S. aid, technical assistance, and weapons flow in, while the Shah tries to modernize Iranian society and develop relations with the West. Shah Pahlavi...
You know... Mic too loud? Better? Leftist audio curse. Yeah, better now? Can you hear the video better? And thank you, Simo. Okay. Well, one thing I've always remarked about is, like, they always keep talking about how he wanted the Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, wanted to modernize Iran right through the White Revolution, which is a name to choose, I'll tell you that. But, well, you're not saturating anymore now. Okay. If it works better, I could also turn off the music too. So, one of the things that I find quite interesting about the White Revolution is that it's actually what started the nuclear program, right? People love to talk about, oh, you know, Iran should have... It never developed it. It didn't begin to make nuclear energy only under the Islamic Republic. In fact, it would have been quite hard to. Why? Because in 1980, the year after the Islamic Revolution, they had the Iran-Iraq War, which lasted until 1988. So they kind of wouldn't have been trying to build something that, if hit, would cause a huge, travesty, right? So we already know that the nuclear program started under the U.S.-backed Shah. Whose video is this? It is Real-Time History.
Encourages other countries in the Middle East to do the same, although Saudi Arabia's King Faisal warns him. Your Majesty, I appreciate your advice.
Wait, is that a chef? I'm guessing that's a chef, right? Like, we must get the highest, the most important people in France to meet with the king, with the Shah of Iran. Who shall we have? We shall have the chefs. um, because he's trying to tell, essentially what Faisal was trying to do was tell him to not do what happened to Joseph II of Austria, right? Where because he wanted to take Enlightenment values and implement them in the Austrian Empire right away, it essentially caused a whole bunch of turmoil throughout, the Austrian Empire. That's essentially what King Faisal is telling him. Like, but also the problem is that this quote also feeds into this idea, right? That is it true that it's considered haram? I mean, no, it's not haram. More so, it's that there's a fundamental disagreement. There's a fundamental disagreement, right? Over who deserved to be, right, the rightful successor to the Prophet Muhammad. And I know we're going to go into this in a little bit, but this is why Karbala is such an important place for Shia Muslims, right? Because the word Shia comes from Shiyat al-Ali, right? Shiyat al-Ali means like the followers of Ali, right? Who they believe should have been the first caliph, as opposed to Umar, right? And said he was the fourth caliph. And so they talk about the Battle of Karbala, where, I don't want to get too in depth, but essentially that's where you have Hussein, where he, fortunately gets unalived, and so this disagreement stems from these things, right? So just to quickly, Ambedkar said you can't have just law without mass social liberation. Imposing enlightenment values on a population that hasn't been socially liberated always fails. Yeah, and I think that that's a very good point. Is that the problem I have when people use this quote is that people use it to then do the racist thing, the Islamophobic thing, to say Iran and a Muslim population couldn't have those, right, enlightenment values, or their socially progressive values, right? That's how people that have a Islamophobic, racist view of this, they'll take this quote and say, even the king of Iraq, right, said this, right? And it's like, no. That's not quite what he's saying. That's actually not what he's saying at all. The Enlightenment wouldn't have happened without the Islamic Golden Age. Exactly. And so, in fact, Averroes was taught until, the 19th century, right? Like, European medicine, you know what I mean? Like, Western medicine. Yes, nuclear weapons are. That answered another question. I'm sorry for the formulation. Wanted to ask if nuclear weapons are considered haram. Yes. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, of late memory, was the one that wrote the fatwa. So the way how, and you can be Shia, and then you have to, what's your Aqidah? Aqidah is whether you're Twelver, Ismaili, Ibadi, whatever it is, right? It's like below whether you're Shia or Sunni, right? But when it comes to questions of fiqh, right, of jurisprudence, right, that is where you get down to what schools of jurisprudence, right? And so the people that follow the of late memory, right, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, he's the one that issued the fatwa, and grounding it, using this idea that the fact that you can have a weapon that could destroy all of humanity goes against, in a sense, all religions, right? Like this idea should be that is against, right? And so he's basing it in that logic, that it's a weapon of mass unaliving, and so therefore to use it when it has caused so much harm, and the harm that's right, therefore it is under his understanding of Islamic law, of Sharia, right, to be, I don't know. Oh, thank you so much, Medita. So yeah, so this is where a misconception, as I said, comes up, where people think that Faisal is saying you can't have Iran or an Islamic country be as progressive as France is. So, I could build an atomic weapon, but first let me check if my religion has anything to say about people who kill non-combatants, right? Well, I mean, and that's the thing, right? Because, like, there are people that did, kind of have this, like, you have right now like a very Christian nationalist, yeah, of course, a very Christian nationalist understanding of a particular form of Protestantism, and it's like they think, that mass destruction is good, right? When it's obviously not, right? Like you would think that, but again, it's of a particular form. It's not at all generalized, but it's done a lot of harm.
May I remind you, you are not the Shah of France. You are not in the Élysée. You are in Iran. Your population is 90% Muslim. Please, don't forget that. In 1963, the Shah launches the so-called White Revolution, a land reform program including education, women's rights, and urbanization.
But, again, see, it's interesting because technically it's a monarchy, but people often describe Iran at this time as a dictatorship, which, I mean, it is, right? But it is interesting to see that people are like, oh, well, we're going to use a different term for this time period, right? Now video is muted, is it? How can this be? Oh, wait. Okay. Let's try it like this.
Oil sales fund the program, and they soar by 670% after Iran refuses to join the Arab oil embargo following the 1973 Arab-Israeli War.
So again, like, after the embargo, which caused the last, oil crisis in the United States, like, this is the thing, is like they always show, right, like inside the bazaar, right, they make it seem like everybody, was like, oh, everything was great until the Fire Nation attacked, right? And it's like, no. The people that started the protest that became the Islamic Revolution were precisely the people here in this video right now, the Bazaris. They're the ones that started rising up first, because just having a lot of ability to sell merchandise and shiny things does not equal freedom, right? Like, yes, women's rights, and then this is when they'll try to show, the pictures of this was Iran before the Islamic Revolution and after, which is bullshit anyway. Because the people that are being depicted are not exactly the average person, right? Because you still had a population that was very rural and therefore didn't live in cities, and therefore could neither afford, right, Western clothing in the first place, among other things, right? But in medieval Britain, there was a system of local armed men dispensing violence on behalf of a distant central authority, with the gloss of religion for justification. We called them lords, and their descendants exist today. We have the exact system in Afghanistan today. We do not call them lords; we call them warlords. Well, that is true. That language, right? Like, it's the reason why they use the language of cartels, and what do they call them, right? They call them drug lords, right? Like, oh, to be lorded, right, is to be given a title of nobility. But as soon as you add in a qualifier like that, right, an affix, right, a prefix in this case, right, suddenly that undoes all of that. Because, oh, well, you're not a lord, you're a warlord or a drug lord. Do you know from where that quote is from, Sandri Kilko?
By late 1975, literacy rates have doubled to 32%, forming a growing middle class of salaried workers and small business-owning families. Women can vote, and officials develop more secular forms.
Again, they can say women could vote, right? They still lived under a dictatorship, right? Under the Shah, who had absolute power. Like, I don't know, like, remember that they got rid of Mossadegh, right? They got rid of Mossadegh in 53. Then gave the Shah, a total control, right? So, to say, oh, thank you very much for the raid, DJ. I appreciate that. It's very kind of you. If everyone here on the Twitch side would do us the great favor of following DJ, who does, I really enjoy the content when you're reading through like very interesting academic articles, but you also give your commentary. I mean, for me, a lot of times it actually like makes me want to look for similar things like about the topic, just because even if it's not necessarily something that's like I'm working with right now, but it still is quite interesting stuff. So definitely make sure to follow DJ if you want. So that's the thing. Like, yeah, they can vote, but they have an absolute monarch that's a dictator. So what is the vote really for, right? Like in reality, like if we're gonna, it's like, oh, they can vote so that way they continue having a dictator, I guess. Like,
of law. But Iran is not a democracy.
But I think that we have just taken what is good for this country. And I even sometimes wonder if this multi-party system is good for those who have it elsewhere.
Like, again, like, think about what he's saying. He's saying, well, everybody else, they have multiple parties, right? Is it really working out for them? Like, this rhetoric, there will always be too much to learn. True. Speaking of learning, if you'd like to help me out in some way, you can always go to my Ko-fi, I don't know how you say it. Donate me directly there. But if you'd like to help when it comes to my more academic stuff, you can always go to my Throne. Yesterday, we were able to get the book Anything But Mexican funded, and now there's the book Predatory States. Also great, it's talking about U.S. imperialism during Operation Condor, something that I've talked about when talking about, like the Mexican dictatorship. So, which ties in with what we're talking about right now, actually, quite nicely. So, also Simon or Midi, tell me if the video is audible for you. You can vote. We can vote for the vizier to advise the Tsar. Don't you want to get a good vizier? Exactly. It's like, what are they voting for? And then the guy that's in charge is like, I don't know. I don't know about this multi-party democracy stuff. Like, I don't even know if it works in the countries that do have it, right? Like, that rhetoric is literally what has allowed for whatever semblance of democracy in a lot of Western countries to be eroded away. By literally saying, well, if we had a dictator, right, like, the boiling point of water would get lower. So I don't know what to say, because there's so many like cliches, right? Like, oh, that the trains would arrive on time, but America hates trains, right? So that the McDonald's would serve lunch 24/7. I don't know.
But is the best because, as I said, just go in the streets and question anybody. You will see the whole country has joined the movement.
This turned out not to be the case. Like I like it whenever leaders like this are like, if you go out into the country, right, and just ask a rando, like I'm sure that unless it's heavily like limited to who you can choose from, they're going to be like, oh yeah, I love living with an absolute monarch in the 20th century. It's great. Well, thank you for that. That's not really the point of what this stream is about, but about the history of it. But still, sure. Great, thanks.
The Shah is a monarch positioning himself as a paternal figure. He centralizes power by appointing loyal but usually indecisive ministers and outlawing political parties.
Oh, wow, there's outlawed political parties. So what was that vote for again? Like, what was the voting for? Really, if we think about it. Right, what is the voting for? Another thing is, like, the fact that they just completely dress completely like European monarchs also kind of, like, I'm sorry, but some of the drip that, like, the Ottomans had, even the Persians had, right, like, that where they did not, dress according to Western standards. It's actually, like, much more it's not to defend anybody. We're talking about how the Shah was. We're talking about the Islamic Revolution. I'm not talking about anything else. This is about history. So, I don't do, like, anyway.
In 1975, all adult men must join the Shah's Rastakhis party, while Iran's secret police...
Wait, so all men have to join the party. That is the Shah's party. But all political parties are outlawed. It's a one-party state. Like, that's the thing about this, is right? First they're saying, like in the beginning of the video, right? They're saying, women were given the right to vote. But now there's only one party. And also all men have to join the party. Like, that's not exactly democracy manifest. But, you know how it is. One of the things is, so this is in the Golestan Palace, right, which during the recent strikes, right, unfortunately was hit. But what it did, I don't know if this will mention it, but one of the other things that is said to have caused the dissatisfaction, again, of the people in Iran, right? And I once saw a very interesting documentary. I don't know if it's on YouTube or whatever, but I saw it when it was on television, right? This was a while ago. But it was talking with people who, again, not the very small percentage of people that lived in Tehran and were upper middle class or wealthy or aristocrats, right? But instead were rural people, particularly from the area where Persepolis is, right, around that area. And this was when they had, right, the world's most expensive party, right, to celebrate, what was it, the 2500th anniversary of Persian civilization, right, by where Cyrus's tomb is at. And, like, asking this woman, I remember because they would wear something that goes across their face like this. It wasn't cloth, it was like something else, but I can't quite describe it. I just can remember the face of that. And, like, asking her about, like, these things, and just how absolutely distant, right, the what was being presented to, people from the United States, people to the European peoples that were invited, right? Because essentially they try to invite like monarchs, they try to invite, heads of state, and how strange it was to see like this complete, difference between the average person in rural Iran, right, that's still barely above subsistence level, right, and then the most expensive party in the world, right, where one thing that, because the area where Cyrus's tomb is at, where Persepolis is a desert, right, very arid. One thing that the Shah wanted to do was to bring all of these trees, right, to plant them and make it look green. He didn't want it to look like it was a desert, right? And he made people stay in these huge tents, right? There were all these massive tents that not only held the party but also were where the people were. And there were pools and blah blah blah, right? But because he also brought the trees, the Shah said he also made it so that they also brought all of these different species of birds. Right. If I remember correctly, there was like one from Spain. Like, it's a bad idea, right? It's a bad idea to do this. And the issue they kept having is because these birds were from other places, right? But they were there to be on trees that, came from Sweden, that came from here, that came from there, right? Is that essentially all of the little birds that they brought over kept dying. So they had to have a whole team to excavate, put all of the trees up, put all of the sod down, right, all of the grass and everything. Then people to bring the birds, release the birds, and then I guess bury the birds. I don't even know what else to say. I guess that's all you can do, right? At that point. Yeah, that. Let me see here. More expensive than Albani's, that wedding was 7 months. 7 months long? That is, did anyone consult a biologist? No. No. I'm actually, I wonder. Let me just switch scenes really quickly. So I can look it up, what the price was. Because I don't know if they'll even have it in... Oh, they probably do have it in dollars. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it pops up right away. Yeah, it was the 2,500th... how much did it cost? It was held over 4 days in 1971 to celebrate the 2500th anniversary of the founding of the Persian Empire. Let's see here. Most expensive party in the world, they can't even run the idea by an ecologist. This is giving the same vibes as the Romanov Ball of 1903. That's the reason why, in fact, there is, okay, it says here, it cost, and I think this was back then, and I don't know where he's sourcing this from, but I found someone that's talking about it. It was $635 million. It lasted for 3 days and featured a guest list of emperors, kings, queens, princes, sheikhs, sultan, and Hollywood stars. And yeah, it essentially was, because like, it was the most expensive party ever, as far as I know. Yeah. They also, they brought in 30, again, this is to show the opulence of it, right? They made a tent city in the desert near Persepolis, designed by French interior designers, right? They also had air conditioning, a lot of air conditioning. They also brought in 37 kilometers, not feet, kilometers of silk silk. Just of one material. One material. Silk. You know, those very conscious the Shah told me we need a team to release foreign birds and a team to bury them. I asked him if birds were dying and he said yes constantly. I told him it sounded like he was just feeding dead birds into a ditch and started crying. Yes, pretty much. That's pretty much what it did. Because they also imported 37 kilometers. That's the distance between LA and Long Beach. Yeah. Yeah. Imagine all of that covered in silk. Right? Like just the 10 freeway or the 710 freeway. Just imagine that's just pure silk. Or the 405, I guess, technically, too. Like, imagine just the 405 just covered in silk. All the way down. Right? Like... That is essentially what this was. What width? I mean, I mean, they used it for everything, so I would imagine, I don't know what the width was, but I mean, if it's 37 kilometers, it's not going to be like, it's not going to be like 10 centimeters. Just one really long strip of silk. They imported 250,000 eggs, 150 kilograms of caviar, and 5-course meals that were meant to last hours. So, yeah, so it says here, the costs were placed at $100 million in 1971 dollars, which was a lot. But it cited between 100 and 200 million plus dollars for the 3-day event. Oh yeah, and not only that, but all of the food, I forgot to add this, all of the food was catered. Like, it was catered by Maxime's in Paris. They couldn't get local people to make the food. No, they had Maxime's in Paris make the food for them. Like, they imported it was over 15 tons, or... It was like almost 20 tons of food was imported just for this one event. Not even to feed the country, right? Or the people of a city. Just to feed guests at this one party that lasted 3 days. So, and yeah, people say that it was one of the last straws that, was it to make a carpet between the tents? Yeah, I mean, I could see it being something like that. Let me see here. I actually am very curious now. Oh, they used it for... Oh, okay, I see. Oh, that's even worse. So the party, they had 50 tents, right, that were suites, right? They were like hotels, right? And also their main banquet hall, which was 68 meters by 24 meters, which is pretty big. The tents, they draped the inside and outside of the tents in those 37 kilometers. So they just used it for draping. So, Shah Jahan would be jealous. Yeah, for real. I'm becoming more social. It's just, again, imagine how the people felt. Like, this is why I always bring up this documentary where they're asking this woman who's lives in a valley nearby and asking her how do you live? And she's talking about how she has to do stuff with this, has to do stuff with that, and and they still have this reverence, right, that they've had for the idea of the Shah, right? But then when they compare this horrifying poverty, right, with what's happening 5 kilometers away at the most expensive party in the world, is just unbelievable. A celebration of your empire, and you don't even eat the food from the empire. Exactly. Persian food, Iranian food is so good. They're like, you know what? we're going to invite the president of France and all of them, and we're going to serve them Parisian food. That's what they did, you know? That's what they did. They served French food in the middle of there. And again, don't even get me started on all of this stuff here, right? Because this is made out of silk, this is embroidered with gold filigree, like, trust me, it was expensive.
The Sabak suppress underground parties like the National Front and the Communists today, while the White Revolution benefits secular...
Oh yeah, I think here he's giving away, like, literal, like, coins of gold. It's like solid gold coins. President of France would eat only frog legs, right? Seulement les... They were like, biryani, tormes sabzi? No, bouillabaisse, exactly. They're like, we made our perfect, perfect, vent volé, en croûte. Oh, gosh.
Urbanites, others resist. Rapid modernization brings inflation, corruption, income inequality.
Again, if you suddenly start, another thing too is this was imperialist investments, right? So yeah, yes, they're building factories and stuff like that, but they're doing it so quickly, and they're doing it because the Iranian people could be underpaid as opposed to other countries around them, especially like it from the. They also don't want to do it to the Soviet Union, right? That effectively it starts to begin in inflation, which is one of the reasons why the Bazaris end up rising up. Why? Because they're the people that feel, right, the effects of the inflation right away, right? They are the ones that have to deal with prices, right, for everyday staple goods, right, like bread, right? Gourmet slop. Yeah. So yeah, like it. I mean, there already was corruption. There already was immense income inequality. This worsened it, and the party didn't help because who pays for the $200 million back then? Party. So I don't know if you want to look up how much it would be worth now. Look up $200 million. That's an estimate. In 1971 compared to now. Like, whatever that amount is, that's how much they paid for 3 days. Literally a long weekend. Like, it's literally Memorial Day weekend. You know? But every day, you know, you have to eat on plates of solid gold. So, you know.
Social tensions and inefficiency. As rural workers move to cities for better pay, many discover that they've rarely benefited.
I mean, again, yeah, I mean, the problem I have with this framing here, and I'm not saying, you know, it could just be the script, it could just be, you know, how you go about saying it, is they didn't discover that they rarely benefit. Like, it's not like they didn't know this. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had to move to the city in the first place, right? Because one of the things that the Shah did also want to do, and this, you know, and this is something that, you know, has always been a big thing that a lot of, you know, the big statist, you know, dictator types, right, what they do is that they always try to mechanize agriculture, right? But what does that also do? It also puts people out of jobs, right? And so that's why you have people here, right, washing their clothing of their families in the street. Because, yeah, you have all this modernity, quote-unquote, all around them. Yeah, you have these French cars and blah, 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 right? American cars. But you also have to look just over next to the gutter. And what do you see? People's mothers, right? Having to wash their husband's clothing, their family's clothing, etc. I mean, and especially because, again, it's not like they got rid of that of the oppression of women and of other marginalized people, right? Let alone queer people, right? It was still there, right? It's not as though they suddenly were manumitted from it. they had to be like, just as imperialism requires, right, people in the global south to survive in all of this misery. And so then that way the living standards of the United States and Western Europe in particular can be as high as they are, right? This is when you have that being so close to, you know, the people that are benefiting from it and those that didn't discover it, but that it didn't, like, when they tried to find some alleviation of the poverty in rural areas, were then just thrown into the mix in with urban poverty, right? The various ambassadors at the party in the middle of the desert slowly melting, making eye contact with the imported chefs who are also slowly melting, right? Russian industrialization required a secret police. English industrialization required the invention of the police as a concept. Oh, these poor Iranian workers. Right. Well, I mean, again, they did mention the Savak, right? Like, the Savak, you know, that very benevolent, I am sure, police organization, obviously joking, you know, that was created by the CIA and the Mossad. Oh, I'm sure that they were very big on human rights. Very big. Very big. In India, most police departments put up notices in busy areas that say report protesters to the anti-tourism hotline. It's crazy. Just yep, the 2019 UAPA. I see. Oh my goodness. Rip Harish, thank you very, very much for the raid. I appreciate it. Welcome, welcome in. Welcome, streamer. Welcome, raiders. This is Shakespeare. And we're currently talking about the lead up to the Islamic Revolution. Hello, Rip Harish. I hope that everything went well, and I hope that you had a good stream. Please make sure to follow a friend of the stream, Rip Harish. Thank you so much for the raid again. Appreciate it. So Rurik saw that today in $2006, the party, so Boy Meets Mini, this goes to answer your question, right? Because you talked about the 7-month-long wedding. It's just 3 days, remember. This wasn't a wedding. This was just 3 days of camping out in the desert, it seemed like. Rurik says it's a cool $1.63 billion. Raiders, remember to refresh the stream so that Mother Algorithm can properly cherish your delicious eyeballs. Very true, very true. Yeah. Yeah, $1.63 billion. 3 days out in the desert. 3 days. Cost more than a 7-month-long wedding. Think about that. Like, you have to, like, again, I forget what were the gifts as well, because they also gave gifts to people, right? And their gifts were like a bottle of Dom Perignon, right? You know, like for the women, like little tiaras, you know what I mean? Like, they spent $1.63 billion in today's money. They outspent a 7-month-long wedding so they could have French food in the middle of Iran. I do find it interesting and concerning that there is this generalized idea that mechanization of agriculture was wholly a positive thing, right? And that's why, like, one of the things that I always point out when people talk about, oh, like all of this technological, like even in my own research, right? It's always, like, I talked about this vis-a-vis how the United States, through its implementation of, like, certain kinds of manufacturing, etc., but in its imperialist turn, right, and when they started to do this in Latin American countries, like, it required the technologies to function in such a way that even things like the nuclear family, right, which one could read as a technology, so to speak, right, had to be imposed upon people, right? Like, you know, people might not think of it, but it's a social technology if one thinks of it like that, right? There wasn't the concept of the nuclear family before. Now it's being imposed on. Why? Because it's what benefits industrial capitalism. Right? Same thing with mechanized mining. That's the reason why it's only with mining and the way it is, right? That they have that mine in South Africa, right? That is like, I forget how many kilometers below. It's like 2 kilometers. Like, unbelievable. And also, yes, if you'd like to help me with my research, which is I'm always thankful for, or if you'd like to donate directly, you can either go to my Ko-fi or you can go to my Throne. You can also tip me here on my Twitch page. There's a button in the About Me page, and I also do have other dono. Just do ! Dono. But yeah, so yeah, the Shah was Louis the 16th maxing. Yeah, very much so. Like, he literally put Marie Antoinette to shame, right?
From the Shah's policies. One villager from Aliabad complains.
Again, this is why I hate those pictures that talk about Iran before the Islamic Revolution and Iran now. This is the type of housing that most people actually lived in even in the outskirts of Tehran. Like, again, and there are still people that I've seen places like this built in neighboring countries, I should say, in Afghanistan, but definitely with that Mashhad, Afghanistan, like by Herat, like that area, you will see housing like this. You will see this. That's the thing, when they show you, right, the conventionally attractive blah blah blah, right, like model looking young woman that's wearing a miniskirt, note that all of this, that miniskirt, right, is paid for by the immiseration of the people that live here. This is what the picture should actually show. There is also strip mining, right, exactly, and that's a whole. So again, when people show you though that was then, that the amount of people that actually got to live that way was so minuscule that it makes America seem as though it is somehow one of the most progressive countries, like when it comes to like education and wealth distribution. Like, it's unbelievable just how bad it was. And I want to be clear, the United States is not, but it just shows that because it was a comprador bourgeoisie, it was, again, like the absolute wealthiest people that even got to really feel any benefit from the Shahs, especially because, again, most of it was imperialist investment, right? Most of the deals were done to the detriment of the Iranians, and especially to the people that work the land, that know the land, that then are forced into cities and then forced to work in factories, right? So, or mines, or other things, right? So,
we have nothing in this country. We see that others are rich and have 7 or 8-story homes, and we live in tents. It takes us 1 or 2 months to get something done in government offices, and the other side had good connections and is able to ruin us. If they attack us and fight us and we go to court, the court does nothing because they are in cahoots with them.
Like, again, this is the real picture. This was Iran before the Islamic Revolution. Because this is from an article, I believe. I don't know how they cite things, because I think it has to be in a book, right? So typically, when you're citing things, if it's in quotations or inverted commas, that's an article. If it's underlined or italicized, that's a book. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it's a book, because I think I have seen the book Days of Revolution before. But yeah, there are people that live here. Like, I believe this picture is in Mashhad, actually. So again, you can see the vast difference. They're talking about, and to what extent this was the case, 7 or 8-story homes, right? Like, if that's why the people that try to say, well, no one here is siding with the Islamic Republic. Like, no one here is like, yes, that's the end all be all what we want for Iran. No. But there was a qualitative change. Right. In comparison to what was happening, how far going that qualitative change went is a whole different story. That's something that's far more, for people who are historians of this country and of that particular time period, right? To go into the most in-depth details of it. But again, you had people that spent over $1 billion, almost $2 billion on a 3-day party. And then you had the vast majority of people who lived far closer, either lived like this or far closer to this, right? Than those pictures that they like to post online. Here to show. Most people do not live in nice, right, nice apartments in the capital. Right? In fact, if anything, Tehran's become more populous now, right, after the Islamic Revolution than before. So,
officials reinvest much of Iran's oil income back into industry or the military, but little of Iran's 1972 to 74 oil boom goes to the countryside.
So again, when Iran is making all of the money because all of the Arab League, right, does the embargo, right, does the oil embargo, and the OPEC, the OPEC countries, they decide to do an oil embargo, right, because of the Yom Kippur War, right. In essence, right, Iran is making all of the money instead of the other states that are, upholding are doing it out of a principle, right. And even though they're making all of that money, where does the money go to? I mean, it's interesting to say it goes back into industry, because at least that's a sector of the economy. The military, though, like, that's the reason why when the Iran-Iraq war started, you did have the fact that, yeah, they did have jets, they did have all of these things, right? Like, it's not like they didn't have any of those things. But again, where does most of that military budget go to? To the Savak, which is persecuting the everyday person. So,
the Shah's reforms split Iranian society into distinct groups, and as unemployment and corruption increased following a crash in oil prices in 1975, some begin to oppose his central rule. Leftist intellectuals opposing royal absolutism and U.S. interference joined the National Front, or Tudeh.
And again, like, the National Front is the one where you have Mossadegh, right? I don't know. Like, when it comes to Tudeh, there's a whole, like, I remember reading this one book that was talking about it, and it kind of left me with more questions than answers, because it focused so much on the early founding, but was supposed to be a comprehensive history, and it just kind of like gave like a chapter at the end that essentially tried to do everything since like the death of Stalin, I guess. So, because I mean, yeah, anyway.
Or radical leftists joined the Marxist-Leninist Fedayeen-e-Khalq or the Islamic Marxist Mujahideen-e-Khalq. Both military.
So, I'm sorry, I like how the one on the two on the right hand side of the screen, they both say hindered by factionalism. The ones on the left, it's like, Broad Coalition Marxist-Leninist, okay, by Bijan Jazani, right? Favored revolutionary armed propaganda, okay. Partially financed by bank robberies. Like, I don't know, I just feel like even, like if the National Front would have done like, it actually was done by fraud, right? There's also this kind of like, any time that they want to describe, I'm not saying that this is not true, I'm saying it's funny that when it comes to leftist anything that calls it so, they always want to make it seem completely criminal, right? And it's just, it's kind of funny when I see it laid out like this, right? It's like, partially financed by them, which again it probably is the case, right? But it's just funny to think of it like it almost comes across, at least to me, as almost cartoonish.
Organizations conduct small-scale attacks and assassinations. Other Iranian intellectuals remain independent of major organizations, partly to avoid Savak's attention. The most influential opponents are religious clerics. Many oppose the White Revolution's secularism, as well as corruption, foreign influence, and the Shah's central power.
It's just funny because, I shouldn't say funny, but maybe having a totalist monarchy who is allied with international capital is bad. Yeah, you never know. It's a bad idea, but how can we be so sure? Thinking of a scene in Game of Thrones where the noble pines for the good old days, and to Squire snaps back, 15 years ago we had a civil war that killed whole cities, and before that we had a dictatorship by a lunatic, and before that the ruling family forced their power with magic flying atomic crocodiles. Shut up. What? Magic flying atomic crocodiles. Wow, that is quite a concatenation of things there. That is quite the concatenation. Is that initially, right, and this is something that monarchies do, and it's a historic thing. They usually try to, this is why monarchies almost always come with state religion, right? Because religion and monarchy, right, go hand in hand, right? Like, what legitimizes the monarchy, right, is the clerics, right? But who is also one of the primary supporters of the religion, and who enforces it upon all the people? The monarchy, right? So some people try to make it seem as though the Shah, right, was trying to play both secular and religious lines, which, I mean, to an extent, that's true. But they often do it in a way that makes it seem like he's not a monarch, right? Like, it wouldn't have been in his interest to have, right, a deeply intertwined state with a religion. They always want to associate criminality with leftist movements, right? Exactly. And it's just weird because it's like, even if the liberal parties would have done the same, it's like, but they robbed a few banks, it's like, well, I guess so, yeah, that's bad, sure. But I just think it's just like a weird kind of like almost cartoonish thing to emphasize. But anyway, the thing being that they keep trying to position the Shah as a person that had really good intentions. He didn't. That really wanted the best for his people. Blah 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 blah. All that stuff. That was trying to play, trying to have it both ways, with secularism and then with, like, traditionally you have to have, with monarchies, you have to have that connection with the religion, right? That's something that even the earlier, his father, was something that even he also tried to deal with at prior generations, of course. But in order to speed up that mechanization and industrialization, that also came with him trying to also distance himself from, right, the clergy to some extent. And it is, so to speak, a double bind. But the main reason why he wanted to separate himself from it, the positioning of him as this, like, tragic figure that was caught up in blah blah blah, why it doesn't really work, is because he wanted to separate from the clergy, because he was afraid that one day they would say that his rule was illegitimate. Because it was from the first place. That's the reason why I find it fascinating that even though it is an absolutist monarchy, people also call it a dictatorship, right? Because that almost suggests a secular, at least, maybe not even secular, but I mean in the terms of like non-religious, right? Like a person that isn't infused with religiosity in the way that a monarch is, right? But also the idea that there is this like, some form of illegitimacy or something that's there, right? That's all about power, in a way that's different from a monarch, right? So that's why I find that. I mean, yeah, sure, we're religious, but we're not religious, right? Yeah, pretty much.
As religious figures, they also partly escape Savak's repressions and combine political messages into sermons. The most notable anti-Shah cleric is Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. Since the early 1960s, he's openly opposed the Shah, who exiles the Ayatollah to Iraq. Described as a revolutionary traditionalist, Khomeini claims democratic republican ideals within an Islamic context. These appeal to young rural.
I mean, again, like, why is it? Like, this is the question that a lot of people do not typically, like, when they're taught about this event and the lead up to the Islamic Revolution, right? Why is it that people felt an affinity for what Ayatollah Khomeini was saying, right? Because they often don't really go into the fact that the things that they love to focus on this idea that he like tricked everyone, right? They love to focus on that. But the other thing is like that he wanted some kind of horrifying, whatever dictatorship, unknown of even to this day. But they don't focus on like what did he tell people that galvanized them in the first place? Because revolutions don't just take place out of nowhere, right? So we've gone over, right, the 3-day, dropping of almost $2 billion, right? You have rapid industrialization that then leads to destitution of people, right? You have the country's economy become so dependent on oil that when the price of oil crashes, right, then the people that suffer the most are the most marginalized, the people, especially people that live in rural areas, right? So what is it about it, right? What is it about what Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, what is it that he was speaking about? Primarily, one of the things that he would do is, one, his message was not directed at all towards the upper classes of society, right? Because that they were already well taken care of. Can't hear the video you're listening to? Really? It's very plain.
Men from traditional backgrounds who now have formal education and work in cities. Those who are out in society more and go into Shiraz are for Khomeini, but the old men who haven't studied and don't go into the city much aren't. There's a difference between those whose level of thinking is lower, who are illiterate and haven't seen much of the situation, and those whose level of thinking is higher. Khomeini also benefits from clerics' historical role as leaders of popular resistance movements. By early 1978, economic crisis and political agitation lead to protests. When security forces react and kill some protesters, the funerals draw huge crowds. The Shah seems genuinely surprised by events which are spontaneous and contradict his self-perception as a beloved figure.
Again, this is why saying it was spontaneous sort of goes against the idea that, of what's going on here. Let's see here. Video volume is better now? Okay, good. I'm glad. Sorry, it's always leftist audio. But again, like this thing, by saying that it was, right, completely unexpected, it's not. Like, that's the reason why there were many warning signs, right? A lot of warning signs. But did he care? No. Because he didn't ever expect it to boil over, right? Because, like, sure, he might have had a self-perception of himself as a beloved figure, but that's pretty much, like, I mean, especially when it comes to monarchs, there is, like, a tendency that, you know, throughout history that some people might argue is just there, right? But in this case, I think we can see that why that wasn't the case. Those whose level of thinking is lower, that don't sound good, champ. Right? Yeah. Yeah.
The US is also surprised. They lack information about Iran or Khomeini and consider the Shah's position stable. In August, riots erupt in major cities, coupled with attacks on symbols of modernization and foreign influence.
And again, people might be wondering, what is that? They start this during the Shah, the Iran of the Shah, I should say, had very good relations with Israel. And so what this is depicting is the national airline of the State of Israel, El Al, right? And in Arabic, it's also El Al, right? It's slightly different pronunciation, but that's what's being shown here. It's the opposite of El Al in Tehran. In fact, I think, there we go. Demonstrators attack and loot El Al Israeli airline offices in Tehran in 1978.
On August 19th, Islamic extremists set fire to the cinema Rex, killing up to 470 people. But many Iranians believe the hated Savak is responsible. Clashes between protesters.
And look, the issue with a lot of this stuff is, one, just, you know, whether or not people took good evidence from the scene, etc., is that it was in an atmosphere where it would have been in the Savak's realm of possibility, right, to try to frame a radical Islamic group, right, or to say there's a radical Islamic group that committed these actions, right? Why? Because it hit a movie house, right? It hit a cinema. And so that is a type of entertainment that usually, right, was able to be afforded by, the urban workers, etc., right? So that's one of the issues that when it comes to the burning down of that theater that some people have contended, if I'm remembering correctly, that it very well could have been the Savak that did it, right? Like the fact that the Iranian populace thought that it was the Savak is because it kind of doesn't make sense that they would have attacked people that would have been ostensibly on their side, because it's not like this movie house, this cinema, was like showing, was blue movies, as they say, right? It was like newsreels and, films from, local studios. So, and American films, right? So, that is the possible vector that people could argue that. But just in and of itself, the trying to blame, right, an Islamic element for having done that crime is one of the reasons why at the time it didn't make sense to people, because most of the clergy were being the sort of vanguard, with what I might put it that way, of this social movement, right? Oh, thank you so very much for the tip from Anon. Thank you very much. And yes, if you'd like to support me, you can always go to my Ko-fi and support me there.
And security forces soon multiply, especially at mosques and colleges. Student Mohammed...
Again, this is important. Why would... this is what I'm saying. This divide, right, that starts to happen between the ulama, and then you have the crown, right, the royals, right, the state. Why would they be having protests? Why would the Savak be attacking people at protests in mosques, right? Like, that begins to show the rift that starts to happen as time goes on, right? That suddenly you do start to get a huge rift between the different sides. But the fact that they're willing to even cause potential death at a mosque is something that only inflames people further, right? Like, let alone at universities, which, at this time, like with the 60s and 70s, you already have a lot of this, right? Like, even in Mexico City in the lead up to the Tlatelolco massacre, right? It was mostly college students that were there. So the Americans were shocked, considering the Shah's position stable. Right, and the Obama White House was shocked when the Arab Spring turfed out the... right. Yeah, like that's the thing. Like, not only are they hiding things from the Americans, which, how much you can really do that, who knows? Because I don't like this idea that, like, America didn't know what was going on. It's like, who was propping up the whole state in the first place? Like they did know. They definitely knew much more than, maybe it's outside the scope of this video, which is fine. That cinema had a family, right? That cinema had a family. Yeah, and it seems strange to focus on the property. I mean, that's something even Marx wrote about. How, like, after a revolt, right? That when the bourgeoisie come back in, that they focus on the damage to property as opposed to the people, the people that are unalived, right? That are on the, are on the ground, right? That we're fighting for something better, right? They focus, this window was broken, when it's like, yes, but this innocent person passed because they were willing to put their life on the line. They shouldn't have been taken away regardless, because of the horrible, immiserating conditions they were in. So...
Amini struggles with police at a teacher's college. The police took up positions and attacked us. We fought them with our rocks. A violent struggle broke out, but we weren't an equal match for them. We were forced to retreat. When we went back...
I mean, again, like, it's funny that it's actually talking about a broken window. They violated the the NAP, yeah. Again, you're talking about people that have access to Israeli and US weaponry, and also Soviet weaponry, interestingly enough. They did have a lot of Soviet weaponry. I mean, mainly because Tehran was neutral, right? Like, that was... but the thing is that even here, right, we weren't an equal match for them, because you have people that have rifles. I mean, you saw that one soldier or whatever, like, running with, and they have rocks, right? Like, this is why some people have made a connection between this and, like, the first Intifada, right? Like,
back into the college yard, I noticed the dean was watching from his window and laughing. At that very moment, a student threw a rock at him. The window shattered. The Shah orders the military...
I mean, again, like, this is why I'm glad that they'll go back to this. These are the college students, right? They were unarmed. The only thing they have are the rocks that are in the yard, right, in the quad of their college, of the university. That's what they have. And even the dean, right, of the college, what is he doing? He's overlooking them and laughing. Right? It really shows, right, the sort of like petit bourgeois interests aligning right there, right? Definitely violating the NAP. But again, this is what's coming at them, right? This is what they're seeing, amassing in front of, again, colleges and mosques, right? And one of the things about being, especially, this is very typical, right, is like, you're not exactly in a position of being heavily armed inside of a religious building. That's very, very typically, that's seen as something you don't do, right? So, let alone when they're protesting outside of it because of reasons, right? But again, this is what's surrounding the mosque. This is what's surrounding the college, right? And then you have the dean up there laughing at you, right? As they come with you with these rifles. I can't tell what kind of rifles these are. These might be different ones, but these three look the same. I can't really tell because he's covering it with that. But these three look the same. I just don't know what they are just by looking at them.
Not to use significant force, but the response is uneven. Some ministers encourage the Shah to make reforms, including legalizing political opposition and adopting the Islamic calendar.
Remember, political opposition. Remember that in the beginning when they were trying to make the Shah's Iran, or rather in the beginning of the video, right, where they were kind of talking about the changes that the White Revolution did for the Iranians. They kept emphasizing how women were allowed to vote, right? And the same people that tried to push this idea that the Shah was better, right? The times under the Shah were better for people, and particularly women, because they could wear miniskirts. And they will bring up, oh, well, they were allowed to vote. Political opposition wasn't legal. Like, they were like, maybe we should allow people to have difference in thought. Because, they can vote and all, but they can only vote for one thing. So, that's the reason why when people preempt, right, front load, I guess is a better way to put it, what happened in Iran, and they try to make the Shah's government look good, when they emphasize things like women could vote, which is under the Islamic Republic, women can vote as well, even now, right? Point being that the difference was this, that they try to frame as like a more democratic era, wasn't democratic at all. So you could not belong to the political opposition at all. That they thought maybe we should legalize it when it's already ending, right? So that's a thing to keep in your mind. They are yeah.
Pahlavi also appoints new Prime Minister Jafar Sharif Imami to oversee a government of reconciliation. But the reforms satisfy few opponents, and released political prisoners join and lead opposition groups. On September 7th, the Shah...
See, this is the thing. This was after the most expensive party in history. This is after, right, all of this destitution. Don't even get me started about the land reforms. Because people like to, he even did land reform. It hardly benefited anybody. Most people found no benefit from the supposed land reforms that the Shah did. Right. No, G3. And because of this, right, all men have to join one party, which is the Shah's party, right? But women can vote, right? Women can vote, but they just can't be part of the political opposition, right? Like all of these contradictory things, right? They keep going, and that they keep compounding the effects of everything. Because notice one thing that isn't really talked about is what were the economic reforms to try to alleviate the conditions. They don't really bring up the Bazaris, but a lot of the people even seen here are Bazaris, right? That's really where the Islamic Revolution really took off. Because they're the people most directly affected, besides, obviously the workers, right? But insofar as inflation, insofar as whether they have access for things to sell those daily staples of life, right? Heckler and Co. Okay. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Also used by Pakistan. That makes sense.
Orders martial law, which bans public gatherings and imposes a curfew. The next day...
Also, yeah, imposing martial law was like one of the worst things to do. That's for sure. It's like, if there was a list of things to not do, that the Shah should have not have done, one of them would have not hold that stupid party because again, who pays for it, right? The poorest. But also, when things are already so bad, right, that you're having confrontations of people with sabak, because one thing I remember that we were having a discussion about religious movements and how it's actually a very rare occurrence that religious figures are against, essentially that they typically emphasize stability, right? Like they don't want things to be, So if you're having protests outside of mosques, if you're having the clergy, right, becoming a vanguard for what began as just a simple protest movement and now has grown into something nationwide, right, that involves all sectors of society, that's to say the working classes, I should say. And like by the time that you impose martial law, like by the time you think maybe we should allow, like it's already too late. So it's already a bit late.
Protesters, many of whom have likely not yet heard the martial law announcement, gather in Jaleh Square, where
like even this too, like, oh, they didn't hear the announcement. Maybe that's true, right? Because they didn't have like Instagram. But they were already protesting, right? The declaration of martial law is the problem, not them having heard or not heard the declaration, right? Because civilians standing and protesting in Jaleh Square does not give any government the right to harm them, like happened here. Right.
government troops fire on them. They kill 68 and wound 205, but some opposition sources claim up to 5,000 casualties. The event, known as Black Friday, causes confusion amongst the authorities, as both ministers and local commanders hesitate to apply martial law. There's also fraternization.
Again, think about what was just said, right? The people that actually are where most of the people live, they are afraid to impose. They're unsure about imposing martial law because they know it's a bad idea. Why? Because they're surrounded by the people themselves. Like it's only always at the very highest stages, at the very highest levels of government, where the idea of imposing martial law, or whatever, right, really has any currency, right? I'm not saying it doesn't have any currency at lower levels, but it's like this is showcasing and underscoring the fact that when it came to the most local levels of government, they're like, this is a bad idea. We probably shouldn't do this. Because they are the people that, one, are the face, right? They are the people that are right there, right? Feel this the most. So,
between protesters and troops. Most soldiers are conscripts from rural areas and are receptive to opposition clerics' religious messages of solidarity or threats to excommunicate soldiers. Most of the army stays loyal, but Chief of the General Staff, General Abbas Garabaghi, is worried and addresses the troops.
Again, Abbas Garabaghi, for him to have said this, shows like of course most of the military high command is gonna say, oh, I mean every dictatorship, even Argentina, Mexico, whatever, right? There's no issue with them whether they choose to stay or not, because almost always they stay with the government, right? Because that's how they have their power, right? That's their whole thing, right? When you have the Chief of the General Staff, right, saying what's about to be said, right? When you have an important, critical vertex like this in a government like the Shah's regime, it speaks to this idea that it was something that you could have simmered down, right? Starts to become kind of impossible to really argue.
At this critical point in our history, I want to urge you to maintain discipline, unity, and obedience to command. Be aware of ill-wishers and agitators who...
Oh, you know what? Sepeher Sabih. This is also a book that I need to read at some point. Because I have seen Sabih cited before.
wish to split your ranks. It is important not to yield to emotional factors and continue to support the legitimate government.
Right. So what this is saying is that the people are enough of a threat right? That they recognize that so the chief of the general staff, right, one of the highest military positions you can be, right? Like if people know about the general staff, it was a Prussian construction, right, that eventually became standard in all militaries in the world. They are the people that essentially do the big decisions of prosecuting war. If his biggest concern is the idea that at any moment, large portions of the military, right, because it was a conscription military, right, could defect, could start that. That's usually when it's a bit late. You know what I mean? Like military-wise. Like that shows how much dissatisfaction from the conscripted army, most of whom are from the working classes, of course, are beginning to feel that, right? Where the rifle, the badge, whatever, right? However the uniform, right? No longer lets them keep that distance that they try to, like, this is why in the United States they also, on one hand, they both, don't care about the military, but why they like the exaltation of the military so much, right? Like, why they want civilians to, almost be very, defer, right? Be very deferring and such to veterans, where even in wars where they were very illegal and in some cases genocidal, like Vietnam or something, right? And Korea, you're still supposed to thank them, right? And it's like this very quasi-religious thing. But that's also supposed to create a distance between the military and the civilians, right? Because there are a class of people that are honored and thanked, that there are holidays distinctly for them, right? That there isn't like a Memorial Day for civilians, right? That did things during war, right? Or otherwise, right? Like there's no real equivalent. So what you have instead is, once that happens to a military, where the chief of the general staff is here saying, we have to keep discipline. That means that everything below him, right, has to be told that there needs to be discipline. So that means there is not discipline happening, right? This means that all of the captains, blah, 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 all the way up to corporal, all the way to lieutenant, major, all the way up, whatever you want it to be, all the way up from a single X all the way up to the 4 X's, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? From the battalions to the corps, right? That means that everything below that, right? Below field armies, right? Below the actual administration of the military, you already have either the rumor of, one might say, defection, right? Or willing to side with the other side, right? Because note that he says the legitimate government. He doesn't say, right, our holy, descendant of Cyrus Shah. Instead, his appeal is to the idea of the state, right? That upholding the government is what's important, not the Shah. This is where I think, like, I get that, they can't fit in everything, but this is a turning point that I've always found fascinating, that I like to emphasize when it comes to talking about this, because it says a lot. I would argue it says quite a lot. When, again, one of the highest members of any military is essentially saying, it's an admission that everything from battalions and corps all the way down to a platoon has been compromised to some extent, right? But then to end it with, we have to uphold the legitimate government, right? We have to uphold the law, right? If that's the appeal, not towards the idea of king and country, so to speak, right? That also says a lot about the other side of the equation, right? So see here. Black Thursday caused confusion among authorities. Hans, are we the... Oh, yeah. Hans, are we the baddies? Right, exactly. Saying, but is this course wise, sir? In that special military voice that means, sir, this course is not wise. It makes me almost think of... I know this is not exactly the good comparison, but you know when, like, the guy that has to tell... You know, in the movie Downfall, that he has to... The one that has to actually tell... You know, Hitler, Steiner is not coming to save you. Before the, you know, infamous temper tantrum.
Throughout late 1978, large protests run parallel with religious marches. Although some ministers advise banning them, the Shah allows them to avoid further enraging protesters. But it doesn't work, and the entire Iran...
See, look, he finally is like, you know what? I probably shouldn't do anything against the protests, right? But this is the problem with how so far it's been told, right? There were protests. Then there was martial law. Then there was a massacre in Jaleh Square. Then there were more protests, but now they're on alongside religious marches. And the Shah is allowing it now, after already having imposed martial law. That's, you know what I mean? Like, in terms of, like, the arrow of time, right? If you think of it like that. It's a little bit... I don't know. There's some issues here. So, that's just...
Iranian free media and institutions like the central bank now favor the opposition. The Shah tries to position himself as leader of a revolution against corrupt officials, while simultaneously...
Again, like... Oh, I do actually... This is... Have you ever wondered why there are so many pictures of Reza Pahlavi, like, that a lot of people have these, like, specific pictures of the Shah? Right? A lot of it is because of this. When the government troops distributed out the portraits of the Shah. That's the reason why, like, there's, like, 5 portraits, or I forget how many there were, but because they mass printed them, right? By saying, well, now they're appealing to the Shah, right? As that. But the Shah's trying to say, like, actually, I'm in charge of the revolution. And the revolution that's against his government. He's saying, oh, I'm actually on your side. I'm actually at the head of the movement because we're going against corrupt government officials. Like, this is the thing. Like, not only are things too late, but it's so late to the point where you start to get very strange formulations like that. Like, you mean you're rising up because you hate, corrupt politicians? I hate corrupt politicians. That's why I'm in charge of your movement. You know, like, it's a little cartoonish. But it is what happened.
Simultaneously announcing a new military cabinet in early November. Henry Precht, the US State Department's Iran country director, notes the inconsistency. The Shah was following a bifurcated policy. On the one hand, the regime had shot a lot of people. On the other hand, he tried to appeal to the population by appointing a new prime minister. It was a confusing time if you were not an Iranian. Is he soft or is he hard? In fact, he was both.
Oh my gosh. Hey, it sounds like someone we know, right? Exactly. But okay, so do you see the portrait? This is why this portrait, like I remember in LA, like I think this is an Isfahan, if I remember correctly, in Isfahan, I should say. But this is why these portraits, like, there are people that have them, and they have them in their house. Because there are some, Iranian diaspora people that I've met before, and, like, you go to their house and they have this portrait. Cringe. Yeah, it's very cringe, but... I mean, I didn't know that they were a supporter of the Shah. Like, I didn't know that. I just knew that they happened to be Persian, right? But yeah, so he tried to appeal. Okay, like, he's like, you know what? The issue is the prime minister, right? Y'all really hate him. You see why what he's doing, because it's so late, actually leaves them with more of a reason why they can target him particularly? He is literally getting rid of all of the people, saying, well, I'll replace this guy, I'll do this, I'll do that, right? But then that shows you, well, who has the power at the end of the day? The Shah. He's the one that you can't get rid of. He can say, oh yeah, it's the prime minister that's bad. Or, oh, it's this guy that's bad, this general, or this whatever. But then he's removing, right, like if you think of it like a chessboard, right? He's removing all of the pawns, but also all of the other pieces, right? Around him. Leaving only himself. Like, that's the thing with this kind of thing. Like, it might have worked earlier, right? Maybe that would have, diminished some of the stuff if they were like, okay, implement some economic policy, whatever. But because he's doing this in November 1978, remember, the revolution takes off in 79, right? Like, it's literally the end of the end, right? Not even the beginning of the end, it's the end of the end at this point. Or definitely the interlude before the end of the end, right? Is that he's also getting rid of the people, the fall guys, right? He's essentially now just choosing a fall guy every single day. But the problem is, when you do that so much, and at that period of time, like by that time, it's very clear that you're not actually the one at the head of the protest movement, right? The Venus, yeah, no, I know. Is he soft or is he hard, right? It's like, in fact, she was both, groping for a solution. Like, what? I play both sides. That way I always come out on top. Right, exactly.
Groping for a solution. The US reaction is muted. Even before the revolution, President Jimmy Carter cooled relations with Iran due to human rights issues. But Iran is still a vital Cold War ally and receives large amounts of sophisticated weapons like F-14 aircraft. Although some US...
So again, you have that. And again, this one here that says US agents out of Iran. Oh, I want to say that one's in Washington, D.C., but no, never mind. I don't think it is. It looks like it, though, for some reason. It's making me think of, like, the White House, like I think that's why the fence. But, yeah, the U.S., yeah, I don't think this is in a... But, yeah, because they're wearing the masks, right? Masks protect us from Savak. It's that simple. It's that simple. By the way, in the community tab on YouTube, which, by the way, if you don't follow me on YouTube or subscribe to me on YouTube, I encourage it. There was a drawing, like a watercolor. It's kind of what it looked like to me. And they had two portraits, right? One of the Ayatollah Khamenei, and then this guy, which is Ali Shariati. Right? Ali Shariati was a person that essentially tried to forge a sort of pathway that, still, kept religious tradition, but also had many things that some people describe as essentially it was social change, right? Great social change that would have actually benefited the vast majority of people, as opposed to the 1% of the 1%.
Officials want Carter to support the Shah. Some State Department figures advise reaching out to Khomeini's entourage, especially Dr. Ebrahim Yazdi, a naturalized U.S. citizen. The inconsistent U.S. response leads the Shah to conclude that they're working with Khomeini against him.
Islamo-communism, yeah. Hello, lessness. Good to see you. Welcome in. I think it's interesting how they're like, the United States is plotting against me. Like, you reach the end where the country that props you up, right? You think that they're the ones leading the revolution. Not that hasn't happened before, right? Not that hasn't happened by the United States, but,
Which isn't true. So the Shah and his government can't get the unrest under control in 1978, and things soon escalate in 1979. In January, the Shah appoints Prime Minister Shapur Bakhtiar to create a new civilian government. Bakhtiar belongs to the banned National Front, so the Shah hopes the new government will calm the protests. Bakhtiar orders political prisoners released, relaxes censorship and martial law, and suggests disbanding Savak and negotiating with Khomeini. Khomeini refuses, and Bakhtiar concludes the Shah's presence is blocking any deal. He encourages the Shah to leave Iran, even as the military insists the monarch's presence is the only thing maintaining the morale of the army. On January 16th, though, the Shah leaves Iran for Morocco. He says it's for health reasons, which is partly true, as he does have leukemia.
Which, by the way, when he did go to Morocco, they actually told him to leave. Right? Like, yeah, he went there. But they were like the pressure was building because of the fact that it was particularly from religious authorities. Right? Because they also have a monarch, right? In Morocco. And they were starting to feel the heat, right? All the way in Morocco. Right? Which is why later he went to Egypt, right? And then went to Mexico. Because the United States was like, nah, we're good, bro. We're good. Why don't you go take a nice vacation in Mexico? And so,
Though this is not public knowledge yet. Henry Precht suggests the diagnosis does play a role. In retrospect, we know now that he knew he was a sick man, and what he wanted more than anything was to pass on to his son a viable monarchy. He wanted his son to inherit the throne. He was afraid if he slaughtered people in the streets and turned over to a teenager a situation he could not handle, the dynasty would be swept aside.
Which, it's interesting because there are actually two claimants to the Iranian throne. Recently they did an interview with the guy. I think he lives in Germany. I want to say he lives in Germany. But he's I forget how it works, but it's like he could be considered first to the throne because he's older than the son. So he could be next in line as opposed to the one. And like some people were saying, like the reason why the son of the Shah, right, the Crown Prince, the reason why he's trying to like regain his throne as quickly as possible. Which, by the way, did y'all see that he was invited to some? It was like a Russian. I think it was Russian. Like literally got into a Discord call with some people and didn't really realize that the people he were talking to were like it was a prank because the guy was dressed like Hitler and kept referencing like my father knew your father, right, and like blah blah blah, right, and it's like I forget how long it went before eventually one of the like the minders, right, that he has is like actually the Shah needs to go do something. He'll call you back later. It was.
When the Shah leaves, protests grow and soldiers defect en masse, up to 12,000 a day. The Air Force, with many educated technicians, is especially rebellious. Hundreds go on hunger strikes against the closing of Tehran airport, which blocks Khomeini's return to Iran. As protesters clash with demoralized Air Force troops guarding the airport, Bakhtiar reopens it. On February 1st, Khomeini returns to Tehran from Paris, where he had gone after being expelled from Iraq. About 1 million Iranians take to the streets to welcome him. He quickly establishes the Provisional Revolutionary Government and takes over government ministries.
By the way, one of the things of Saddam Hussein is that they said he paid for the fact that he got kicked out, that he kicked out the Ayatollah Khomeini out of Iraq, right? Because when the Ayatollah was in Iraq, right, which is majority Shia, right. A lot of his speeches, as well as Ali Shariati's speeches and such, were distributed by cassette tape, right? Or people would call in, right, on their phones, and they would listen to it, right? This was common back in the day. And, had he stayed there, right, and had they not done all of the stuff that went on, right, he probably would have just stayed in Iraq. Right, but because Saddam Hussein intervened, right, in the way that he did, and kicked him out of Iraq, right, and then he went to go live in a suburb of Paris, the Ayatollah, that is, not Saddam Hussein. That added even more, because then people wanted to interview, right? People wanted to interview the Ayatollah, right? Like, who is this man that, And so this is when you start to see much more of the Western interviews that are out there on YouTube. So, they told him to leave Morocco. Yeah, they told him to leave Morocco because the pressure from their own citizens, right, that knew what was happening in Iran. The fact that also even in Egypt too, because he was actually in Egypt during the rule of Sadat, right, who eventually got assassinated. Was that because of signing the peace treaty with Israel? Most people would say is that again, Iran had the Shah had very close relations with the state of Israel. Right, that's why they had an El Al Israeli Airlines office in Tehran, right? That plus other things, right? Like he benefited because he didn't do the oil embargo against the United States. He didn't do all these things, right? And so it just became one of those things where it's like having him around is just like tempting fate with bad, repercussions. So that's why he then tried to go to the United States, but then he had his flight. Essentially, they told him, you can't come to the United States, right? He needed the medical treatment that was in New York, if I remember correctly. Because I know that there's a documentary about this where they do actually meet doctors that did know and that were trying to handle his... Because one of the issues is that he... Like why it advanced so far, his cancer, was actually because a lot of the ministers, when he was not as sick, right, had kind of told him to ignore it, right? They weren't really they didn't really see it as an issue, right? From what I can remember from the documentary, anyway, like they weren't willing to have him go to other countries or whatever. And then by the time it started to get much worse, that's when all of this starts happening. And they keep telling him, don't leave the country, otherwise the military will defect. Which did happen. As they said, 12,000 soldiers a day defected.
Including foreign affairs, finance, and justice. Bakhtiar attempts to incorporate Khomeini's shadow cabinet into his own, but Khomeini doesn't cooperate. On February 11th, loyal Imperial Guard troops clash with rebellious Air Force cadets at Doshan Tepe Air Base. Armed
Rurik says, an amusing anecdote. Khomeini's pen name was Hindi because his parents did an Hindi program. Yeah, yep, very true. And that was another thing too, is he also had a lot of appeal in with Shia Muslims because I forget if it's total number. I think it must be total number of Shia Muslims in the world. It would be in Iran, in Pakistan, if I remember correctly. You have lots of Shia communities like in Mumbai, etc. But yeah, makes sense that his pen name would be Hindi, actually.
Civilians join the cadets and capture a machine gun factory. The Air Force refuses to bomb the facility.
Again, when this was something that the chief of the general staff, right, when he had to appeal to the idea of the legitimate government, it's already too late. Right? That's what I was trying to get at earlier. This is so late, right? Because now the Shah left, right? He's in Morocco, will eventually go to Egypt, and then be kicked out of Egypt. Be told to leave Egypt, and then go to Mexico, because the United States won't take him in, right? And so that's when literally you hear what you just heard, that they took over a machine gun factory. And even though that's how much the discontent had reached into all of the ranks of the military, right? To the point where the Air Force wasn't willing to do something that maybe would have bought the regime a bit more time, but ultimately I don't think would have really done much.
forcing a crisis of allegiance for commanders. Many now favor Khomeini, and on February 11th, the army declares neutrality. This seals the fate of...
So remember, November 1978, right? You have those things that the Shah is trying to do. February 11th is when the army says that they will lay down their arms, right? That they will be neutral. February 11th. So November 78 to February 79, right? That's when everything just is complete, like it's over, right? It's Jover. And yet, a lot of the people that try to, make it seem like there actually was a desire to keep the Shah, make it seem like, oh, there actually were a ton of people that would have like, you're having mass desertions in the military. You're already having people even coming in from the countryside into cities to protest, right? Like, the amount of discontent was enormous, right? So by the time you get the checkpoint to enter the Golestan Palace, or actually, I think this is where the Majlis, the parliament, is at in Tehran, and you start getting tanks with the Ayatollah, it's beyond over. It's well over.
The Shah's government as even loyal forces defect. Once we were named the Imperial Guard. Today, we accept whatever name people will give us. We have ordered the surrender of all units under...
Oh, yeah, no. So this is the Royal Coat of Arms. Yes, so this is to the Golestan Palace. So yeah, they literally put Khomeini on top of... And if you look at the coat of arms of the royalty, of the crown of Iran, is that it has like it has the lion, right, holding the sword. It also has the Farbahar, right, of the Zoroastrian symbol, blah blah blah, right. So like, by the time you have this outside of the Golestan Palace, right, which is indicated by the coat of arms, it's like, instead you have three portraits. Two of them are the same, but three portraits of the Ayatollah, right, instead of
our command. Bakhtiar resigns and flees, while Khomeini takes control and dismantles martial law. He is now the de facto leader of Iran. So the Shah and his government have fallen, but Iran experiences revolutionary chaos in the following weeks, made worse by the 300,000 weapons in circulation after the collapse of the army. Many groups of young men self-appoint revolutionary committees. Some take up police duties, including arresting supposed counter-revolutionaries.
Wow, I can't even imagine what if this were colorized. Oh, the intricate tiles. But yes, because you have the mass desertion of the army, because that is one thing that you essentially get. It essentially breaks down into a kind of civil war, one might say, but on many different fronts, because again, you still have the different factions, right? The different parties that want, whether it's for them to be Marxist-Leninist and then to ally with the Soviet Union, which was a very real possibility, right? It definitely wouldn't have been, it definitely would have been in the Soviet Union's interest to do that. Instead, you have these different groups so many factions that try to, gain some foothold of power, and I think they're going to talk about that.
One armed group, the Party of God, or Hezbollahis, pledged themselves to Khomeini.
So, the people that wonder, where did that... Yeah, they already had this concept, the Hezbollahis. And so, yeah.
But he exercises only limited control. His provisional government cannot prevent revolutionary courts summarily trying and executing 68 people, including military leaders. Tension also developed.
And again, this is the thing, right? This is kind of like during the terror, right, or whatever, during the French Revolution, right? Like once it starts getting out of control. Because yes, you have the person that became the figurehead for this is why the people that try to make the Islamic Revolution be black and white, right? There's the Shah and then there's Khomeini, right? doesn't take into account things like this interim period. Like, yes, once so many things had been done by Bahti, there's nothing really left for him to do but leave, right? Because Khomeini doesn't want to share power with, because he doesn't want the Shah to come back, right? But this is before you get al-Wati al-Faqih, right? This is before you get that, right? The governance of the clerics, right? So this is before Khomeini can actually have total power over the state.
With the U.S. In February, protesters stormed the U.S. embassy, resulting in a brief hostage crisis. Both sides quickly de-escalate, but the development concerns the U.S., who initially hoped to normalize relations with the new regime. Many in the U.S. are stunned at the Shah's rapid collapse.
See, was it really rapid though? That's the problem with the framing, is that it's like, oh, it was so it wasn't really that rapid, right? Like, if they're talking about that last 4 months, right, where everything just seems to fall apart, yeah, I guess if you only look at that. But if you really zoom out, right, even with the beginning of the White Revolution, right, which is earlier in the decade, had the reforms that were done and the economic reforms that needed to be done, had the land redistribution actually been made to benefit more people than it actually benefited, right? Like, there were things that could have been done that they weren't done. And let alone like Savak, right? Like all of the stuff Savak did, right? Putting down any protest that happened before, because there were protests prior to 1978, right? And even before that. So that's why the idea that, oh, it was so rapid. It's like, it's only rapid if you think that it was just those last 4 months. And I think you have to go back at least to the 1960s. At the very least, right? At least a decade before, if not a bit more, to really sort of see that, like, this was one of those things that eventually was going, especially after 1967, right? Because after the June War, right, of Israel occupying the West Bank, Gaza, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights, right? That Iran was still willing to have warm relations with the State of Israel, right? Them not participating in the oil embargo, right? That all of the Arab League and that the OPEC, right, had decided to do, right? There already were signs that something like this was going to happen, like, because the relation that the Shah and the highest level of the aristocracy and such had with the State of Israel wasn't something that the vast majority of people supported, including Iranian Jews. To add to that as well. If you're a monarchist, you might not want to go to France. You might not.
How could Iran, with its oil and strategic situation between the Soviet Union and the Persian Gulf, between Europe and the Middle East, fall under the sway of a holy man out of the mists of the 13th century?
This is already like Suzanne Maloney, right? In the Iranian Revolution at 40. Like, it is a little bit like, oh, they have so many resources and they're in such a strategic position. How on earth could they have fallen prey to this blah blah blah? It's like, this is your brain on Western imperialism, right? Because you can't see it, right? How they're so perfectly placed, right? They have all of these resources and blah blah blah. Didn't the CIA get rid of the person that wanted to nationalize those resources so that way it would benefit, that way it would go into the state coffers that he then wanted to redistribute out to the people in social services? Like, this is the problem with this framing. Oh, it was so rapid, it was so sudden, let alone saying that Ayatollah Khomeini is from out of the mists of the 13th century, whatever that even means. You know, and again, yeah, it's like, how could a Shah, a monarch, that also people call a dictator because he was, who commanded more tanks than the British Army, more helicopters than the United States First Cavalry in Vietnam, how could they just be pressured so neatly out of power? Pressured out of power. They got themselves out of power. They weren't pressured, right? They created the pressure that made them have to leave power. That's the problem with this framing. Also with the framing that it was sudden.
Could the Shah, a monarch who commanded more tanks than the British Army, more helicopters than the United States First Cavalry in Vietnam, be pressured so neatly out of power? The answer is partly the wide inter-opposition support for Khomeini. To maintain this, he appoints moderate nationalist Mehdi Bazargan as prime.
It was more renegotiating the oil deal with the Americans to cut the British out. Right, exactly. Because initially BP, right, they wanted a controlling stake, right, of 51%. And then with the Americans, you have another deal that's also like that. But it was different, right? But that was already, because 1971, if I remember correctly, 1971 is the year that the British pound stopped being the unit of account for oil sales, right, in the Middle East. Well, really the world, but that's when you have that, you know, like the last vestige of that that type of imperialist control that the British had in the 50s. That's when you have that. Although I would say that's only when it was eclipsed and stopped being that. But obviously the United States dollar was climbing that way all the way there. It's Western assumptive racism. Yeah, exactly. Because the Ayatollah Khomeini, he was not from the midst of the 13th century, right? Like, he was very well educated and everything. Yes, he was educated in religious studies, but that doesn't mean he doesn't know anything, right? Like, it also makes it seem as though the people were tricked. You know what I mean? Like, by this like shadowy, like magical figure, right? Like it's something I've always disliked about that framing by the people that try to do it was so sudden, how could people have fallen under the Ayatollah's spell, right?
Minister of the new republic. In March, Khomeini orders a referendum on the question, should Iran be an Islamic republic? 98.2% answer yes. Observers note issues with voting, including color-coded ballots revealing voters' choices, but the results are largely considered legitimate.
So, whether you chose Adi or Ba, right? Because Adi means no in Farsi, is that they did have that. But the fact that the results are largely seen as legitimate is an important thing to put in there. Yes, we know that they did. But that was because the system that they had, from what I understand, was that you chose... Remember this. I'll put it like this. Remember that when they said the Shah had raised the literacy rate, the rate that they had risen it to, right, was 32%. So when it comes to things that, and I'm not saying that it's good or bad, I'm just saying these are different ways of going about it, right? Like, for example, a lot of people say that US money is very ableist because, unlike Mexican money or Canadian money or British money, right, there is nothing there, right, for people that are blind to be able to tell the difference between a $1 bill and a $100 bill, right? Like, even euros, right? They're in different sizes. That's why, gosh, what's his name? He used to be asked, he was a blind jazz performer, jazz musician, I should say. He would ask to be paid, because they would say, oh, I'm going to pay you $100, right? But he's blind. So if they said, oh, I gave you a $100 bill, and they really gave him a one, right? You can't see. Because there's no way for you to tell, right? There's no way for people to put braille on it, right? So he would ask to always be paid in singles, right? So yeah, it's a lot of singles, but then he can know that he's being paid the correct amount, right? Because that's the only way, because all U.S. bills are the same size. Commanded more helicopters than the Americans in Vietnam. What happened to the Americans they had in Vietnam? How did that... Exactly. And I mean, like, that's why, like, the book here that's Predatory States, right? Like, that's one of the things it talks about. Like, one of the things of Operation Condor, and it's kind of playing it out, actually, with Trump, too, where, like, because they were able to install, like, you know, like what happened in Chile and stuff, right? With Pinochet, it's like it kind of does this thing where then Americans think that, oh, we could just recreate this everywhere we go, right? And it's just like, no, like it really very much is more of a fluke than anything. But especially what happened in Venezuela. But you know, that's a whole different story. But help the Muslim law wizard cheated. The Shah. That's literally how a lot of the pro-Shah people are. Like I like, it's not incorrect to an extent, right? It's not incorrect to an extent. But anyway, so what I was saying was, so because of this, because the literacy rate is still low, blah, 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 right? People have argued that this is a way for people to know, right, what they're voting for. Oh, well, if you tell people that if you vote ba, right, which is no, right, that you get the Manila colored one, right? Or pardon me, if you say yes, and if you say no, right? Or yeah, sorry. Anyway, Audi, right? If we want to vote Audi, right, for it to become an Islamic Republic, right? Then you get the green one. Like for people that can't read, that's one way of doing that for them, but they still have to put it in the ballot box. So, like, I get why people are like, well, there's an issue, but the issue is, again, if the literacy rate was only about a third of all people, 66% of the people, therefore, are not literate, right? They have to find other ways of telling them what they're voting for. Right? So the fact that even though they had the different colored slips of paper, whether you're voting Bach, Audi, right, then allows you to say that's the reason why a lot of people do say that they are largely legitimate. So.
Even many moderates favor an Islamic Republic and recognize the cleric's role in organizing revolution. However, Iranians disagree on how an Islamic Republic should function. Moderates worry about revolutionary committees imposing strict religious morality and deteriorating international relations. Iranian-American scholar Saeed Amir Ajaman concludes, the coalition between the Shiite clerics and the westernized bourgeoisie was unstable. It rested on fraudulent silence on the part of the former.
Yeah, this is an interesting coalition. It did not last long.
And on wishful self-delusion on the part of the latter. It did not last long. Khomeini uses the divisions and the threat posed by the armed leftist groups to centralize authority. Although his regime faces some opposition, including assassinations by guerrilla groups, he maintains a stable traditionalist foundation, creates new parties, and sides with radical elements to further marginalize moderates. He also sidelines Bazargan, who wants to improve relations with the US. Events escalate again in November 1979 when the
Oh gosh, like the 70s were just a completely different era. Like, I mean, I have seen people that wear shorts like that now, but that's still like, this is like, right away, this just places you. Also, why is he dressed like Cher? I don't know why. I don't know why I compare it to Cher. But I swear I've seen Cher wear this outfit. That's also 70s, I guess. But, yeah, like something like those shorts. Like, very 70s. Oh, and by the way, because I'm technically covering up, the person I'm covering up is the Crown Prince.
Exiled Shah requests medical treatment in the US. Carter is reluctant, but faces pressure from Shah supporters like Henry Kissinger and David Rockefeller. When Carter finally allows the Shah temporary shelter, angry protesters again storm the US embassy in Tehran and take 52 hostages. Both sides expect a repeat of the rapidly resolved February crisis, but Khomeini hamstrings negotiations. Bazargan resigns in frustration.
Oh yeah. Well, it's up there. So yeah. So this is Arafat, and then that's Khomeini.
And Carter faces pressure to bring the hostages home by other means. So in April 1980, he orders Operation Eagle Claw, a special forces rescue raid. But 3 of the 8 US helicopters assigned to the mission suffer technical problems, while another
White suburban nuclear family aesthetic. Yes. I mean, yeah, like, if you know where the Shah lives now, and it's not like, oh, they literally talk about it in every news report he's in. He lives in Maryland. Like, he's lived most of his life, far more than he ever lived in Iran, in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. So, yeah, definitely very much a white suburban America family.
Crashes into a fuel tanker while refueling in the desert, causing an explosion that kills 8 American servicemen. The raid is a failure.
You know, the fact that there is so many instances where the United States tries to do something against Iran, right, like in this way, and they fail in very similar ways, I don't know, it's fascinating. Obviously, you know, it is what it is, but it's also fascinating in its own right.
It was my responsibility as president to launch this mission. It was my responsibility to terminate the mission when it ended. This was a decision that was shared completely by the field commander in charge of the rescue team and by the officer in charge of the overall force that was involved in the rescue effort. There is a deeper failure than that of incomplete success, and that is a failure to attempt a worthy effort, a failure to try.
Eagle Claw hardens Khomeini's resolve to keep the hostages.
Which, remember, like, because this fails the way it fails, they eventually leads to the election of Reagan in that November. And what's sad is that, not sad, but what's funny, I guess, in a weird way, is like, they were like, oh, look at how he failed to do this, and then what did Reagan do? He did the Iran-Contra affair. So, you know.
And it's a political disaster for Carter. His approval rating is already low, and in November 1980, he loses the election to Republican Ronald Reagan. Carter's team eventually agrees to a deal with Khomeini before Reagan's inauguration. Khomeini will release the hostages in exchange for the US pledging to not interfere in Iran and
Yeah, and this too, right? Like, now this is all being said like, oh, Reagan did it, but couldn't have.
Seizing Iranian assets worth $25 billion in today's value. Iran appears to make no concessions, although some claim Khomeini secretly agrees to Israel selling arms to regional rival Iraq. The deal comes into effect 20 minutes after Reagan's inauguration, freeing the hostages after 444 days.
Again, this is the reason why the people that say that Reagan released the hostages, right? Like, Reagan as president, that is to say, right? Not through this negotiation. So he was already doing negotiations under the table, you know, behind the screen door, however you want to put it, prior to him becoming president. Then he still did it again with the Iran-Contra affair, right? So.
Days. The timing has led to allegations from Iranian and US officials that Reagan covertly encouraged Khomeini to delay releasing the hostages until his presidency began.
And again, people do act like he, through his maneuvering or whatever, right, like as a president, right, with, oh, the might of the American whatever, blah, 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 that's how he got them released. But it was right after he was inaugurated, so it just doesn't make any sense. But the myth sort of persists.
The Iranian Revolution dramatically shifts regional and global relations. Iran extends its influence across the Middle East, including by exporting Hezbollah as a militant group supporting Shia Muslim minorities in Arab states like Lebanon. The US loses a major ally in the region and looks for new allies opposed to Iranian hegemony, like Saudi Arabia and Israel. Meanwhile, anti-American...
Hold on. The United States did not realize after the Islamic Revolution that Israel can be their ally. I'm sorry, that's just not true. That's not true. That is just, I don't. Maybe they're using that term in a way that is but I wouldn't use that wording. They already very much had Israel as being what they were, because literally the 67 war and the 73 war would have been impossible without them being an ally of the United States. That doesn't make any sense. Hola Shaq, mi papá es... Imagine. Reagan reminds me of those Gross Trigger U videos where they glaze him. Yeah, and they do glaze him. They glaze him thicker than a Krispy Kreme.
Rhetoric becomes a cornerstone of Khomeini's position as supreme ruler and propaganda against Iranian moderates. It's a policy that continues until today, although political analyst Suzanne Maloney notes a certain irony.
I think it's interesting how, like, this was during COVID, it seems. I do find it interesting that, like, so many countries, like, they know the United States flag almost better than Americans themselves, because they're always having to make them, right? They have to make them in order to do things like this, right? It's like one of those things where, like, if you were to ask the average American necessarily, right? Like, if they, you know, I think the 50 states thing is kind of known. I think that's one thing, but maybe like the amount of stripes they might not necessarily get on first try. But I will say that the things that are numerical do tend to be pushed more than others. So maybe, but it is an interesting thing that like you know, it's actually, you know, like if you were to just draw it by hand, you wouldn't necessarily get the.
By grounding its identity and legitimacy in anti-Americanism, Tehran remains just as firmly contingent upon the United States as the Shah ever...
See, this is the thing with Maloney, right? This is the issue I have, is that it by saying it's just anti-American, right, denies the fact that it's not as though, therefore, like, the reasoning behind it is, I wouldn't say is the same as the Shah, right? Because Iran is not there, so to speak, to be, it doesn't just exist as a hater, right? In fact, if anything, it's the other way around, right? The United States is as firmly contingent upon the Islamic Republic existing, right, in order to legitimize its Islamophobia, its imperialist racism, etc., etc. Like, I would think that's actually a better way of thinking of it than to say Iran exists so that then it could hate America, because that kind of doesn't really follow, but...
was. Iran's revolution has the largest impact on its neighbors. Although Iraq's Saddam Hussein hosted Khomeini for years, this relationship of convenience soured when Iraq deported Khomeini shortly before his return to Iran. The revolution also undermines previous Iran-Iraq agreements, which resolved border disputes and barred Iran from supporting separatist Iraqi Kurds and anti-Saddam Shia movements. As Khomeini
and again, this isn't really going too in depth on it, but like, it's these things that eventually, like, and it's interesting that they do focus more on Iran's supposed, like, misgivings or wrongdoings, because ultimately it was Saddam Hussein that thought that he could invade Iran, right, to go into Khuzestan and to, which is the most southwestern province of Iran, and be seen as a liberator by the Arab minority that lived there. So that way he could take Khorramshahr and Abadan, right, which is also because of the Iraq-Iran war, because that's where Saddam Hussein invaded. That was one of the main reasons too why am I forgetting it now? The name of the island, Kharg Island, right, became where they decided to put the main port for their oil industry, because it was away from the front, between Iran and Iraq. Because previously, Abadan, right, historically has been where the oil industry, right, and there you have the ports, right, that can host tankers that go all the way down into the Persian Gulf, right? And because you have the same when it comes to Iraq, right? That's the one part of it's that, like that one part of Iraq that actually touches the Persian Gulf, right? Like Iran's is just on the other side of that line. Hence why the most destructive battles were to take, and they actually did take over for a brief period of Khorramshahr, but also tried to take Abadan, but they weren't able to fully control all of Abadan during the Iraq. But if you really look at it, like the war, like it was a war of attrition, but it also was a total war. Like it essentially was like World War I in many respects, and people have comparatives to that, because although there was very little movement of the front, right, the amount of destruction that either side had was unbelievable, and let alone trench warfare, right? Like,
continues to suppress internal opponents throughout 1980, revolution gives way to what some call the 20th century's last total war. The Iran-Iraq War was supposed to be an...
See, I don't know if we should say that when we still have the Yugoslav wars happening. Like, how can we not consider that a total war, but the Iran-Iraq war being the last one? Why is it that they want to place it in the Middle East as opposed to in Europe? And very much, right, something that the United States had, a lot of hands of itself in, right? That's one of the problems I have with saying, like, it would be one thing if, yes, we could say it was, and there didn't come any real consequence of that, but I feel like doing that erases the fact that you have the Yugoslav wars, which the United States had a hand in fomenting, and issues that, with the fall of the Soviet Union and everything, right? Like it kind of denies the total war aspects of the Yugoslav wars that the Iran-Iraq war might share, but I don't know if I would call it the last total war. I'm inclined to be like, fine, but also I still think of the Yugoslav wars and think, I don't know how we can't consider that. Because, especially when there was a genocide, right? Right? That's like one of the things for me to call this the 80s, the Iran-Iraq War one, and not the one in the 90s. I don't know. There's just something about it. Actually, relations with Israel had been going on for quite some time. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, since the CIA was founded. Yeah. Their documents show that they were already investigating Israel and were impressed by the level of democracy in the Middle East. It's like we can't be anti-American for some reason. Who knows why? Right, exactly. Like, again, like this is also true. Like, so in the book, Predatory States, like because it's talking about U.S. involvement and the way in which it did so in Latin America, which is why it's one of the things that my research does delve into. Which, if you'd like to support, you can definitely go to Throne and do so. Or you can go to Ko-fi and support me there directly, is that by saying that, it's just anti-Americanism, right? Like, that's all what it exists for. Is like, why do so many countries in the global south have very similar sentiments about the United States, right? Because when you isolate it to just Iran and say, oh, well, they're just doing that because they're haters. History, hello, famished integral. History is fascinating, is interesting. Always been good at it growing up. Oh, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. I've never seen this badge before. NASA Artemis 2. Oh, that's so cool. I didn't even know they had one like that.
Easy victories cementing Saddam Hussein's legacy as defender of the Arab world. Domestically, his Ba'ath regime ruled with an iron fist, and Saddam was preparing his son Uday to one day take over. If you want to learn more about Uday Hussein, the so-called Mad Prince of Iraq, you should check out Real Life Lore's new series Mad Kings on Nebula. Creators of Chernobyl and the Soviet nuclear program, and all our regular videos ad-free.
Okay.
Nebula is available in 4K
Oh, it's for
resolution in
Nebula.
your browser, on your smartphone, smart TV, or streaming box like Apple TV or Roku. Right now, you can also get the Nebula Lifetime membership. Pay once and get access to everything Nebula has to offer for as long as you and Nebula exist. The Lifetime membership allows us to invest in more original content and improve the platform for everyone. 1/3 of your Lifetime membership will also support us here at Real-Time History directly. Again, that's nebula.tv/realtimehistory for a great deal that also supports this channel. To learn more about the immediate aftermath of the Iranian
Ethical react, I guess. That's what I'll kind of do. It's interesting. Real life lore, aka discount Wendover, right?
revolution in the region, check out our videos about the Iran-Iraq War and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. As usual, you can find all the sources for this video in the video description below. If you're watching this video on Patreon or Nebula, thank you so much for the support. We couldn't do it without you. I'm Jesse Alexander, and this is a production of Real-Time History, the only history channel whose level of thinking is higher.
Oh. Okay. Thanks for that. I did not know that that's what he said at the end of the videos. But okay. Okay. Cool. Definitely. When it comes to Arab countries, they call them regimes. Yeah, I know. They call them regimes and iron-fisted. That's some level of projection. The chat joke at the end of the video. Yeah, I don't know what to say. I'm just like, Sure, yeah, great. It's all good. Wait. Okay. That's, interesting. Oh, wait. There is something that I want to show, really quickly, in a second. You have to see it. Like, it's just one of those things I can't really describe very well, because it's kind of like, I can't believe this is a thing, but it is a thing. Just give me a moment. I have to make sure that it pops up first. Oh, it's gonna start playing right away, isn't it? Ugh. I hate that there's no good way to, like...
Do one of your funny comments.
Okay. I think I stopped it. There we go. Okay. Oh. Oh my gosh. Sorry. One of those days. Okay. That doesn't really help, actually. Here. There we go. Okay, I got it. I think. Let's do one of your funny comments.
Do one of your funny comments. Oh, no. Don't think that's appropriate. Oh, come on. Give us one. No, really. Do it. Crazy comment time. Well, if you insist, then this time the war will be spiritual. This time it will come from space.
Wait, did it? Oh my god, I just realized it's not going to show it, is it? Or is it showing it? Is it showing? Oh, yeah, it is. Okay, good. Fine, never mind. I'll just restart it because it's so short anyway.
Do one of your funny comments.
Do one of your funny comments.
No, don't think that's appropriate. Oh, come on. Give us one. No, really. Do it. Crazy comment time. Well, if you insist, then this time the war will be spiritual. This time it will come from space. I will help. I will come from space, from another galaxy. This time y'all will not overcome us. We will overcome you for all eternity. Your technology has no power. There's a higher technology. Once they communicate with us, your life, your time is over. You will fall by the sword. Dude, what the fuck? Do one of your...
So, I felt like that needed I felt like that needed to be shared. That's definitely one of those things that needs to be shared. So, anyways, now you know what it's like talking to people that deny what the Civil War was about. Let's see here. Oh, I hate the fact that the Lego videos, if you know what I'm talking about, you know, that you can't play them, otherwise they will get claimed, because it would be nice to play one of them. Since they aren't copyrighted songs, but apparently Lego stuff is copyrighted. Yeah. And yes, if you'd like to support me in some way, you can always go to my Patreon. I think it's this one. Go there. The last one was fire, right? Yeah. They're all really good. I mean, there was only one where I was like, okay, that's okay. But they're all still good. Let's see here. Why the US left Syria? I hope they left Syria. Goodness, they need to leave people alone for once. Oh, they never learn. The only ethical use of AI, right? That's the only one. We can only have one data center, and it's in Tehran, and it belongs to the Revolutionary Guard Corps. That's the only one that's allowed. The only one that's allowed. Let's see here. Ooh. You know what? I think. Sorry, I'm trying to find the video that I had saved earlier, but it's not. I guess I didn't like it, or it's not showing up on my watch history. Or is it? Ah, here we go. Found it. Oh. Come on. Okay. There we go. If you know the intro to this channel, you know the intro to this channel, because it's pretty well known. So, okay. Kings and generals, yes. But this is the Muslim schism. How Islam split into Sunni and Shia branches. So.
Today, there are more than 1.5 billion Muslims living across the globe, with Muslim-majority countries spreading from Morocco to Indonesia. But just like virtually all other religions, Islam is not united and has branches interpreting the Quran and matters related to political events in the history of Islam in a different way. The two main...
I mean, you can even see that within, in the Hijaz. Like, I don't know why, I think one thing nation states do is that they give people the impression that things can be, kind of averaged out for something that is not really, I don't know. I feel like when it comes to different expressions of cultural things and religious things, it's kind of difficult to really do that kind of averaging out that people like to do with nation states, because especially since so many nation states are new, right? It seems strange to me for them to flatten those
denominations of Islam are Sunnism and Shiism, with Sunnis making up 85 to 90% of the Muslim population. But how did the split in the Muslim world happen? In today's video, we're going to talk about the schism in Islam, the emergence of Sunni and Shia Islam, and the effects it had on the Caliphate and beyond.
Well, I do think it's interesting though, in this map, right? They always like to show this map, but it doesn't really speak to some historical aspects that kind of need to be addressed. And that is by the time of the height of the Abbasid Caliphate, or rather by the time the Abbasid Caliphate comes on the scene, really, only 10% of the people in Iran, right, and sort of Persia, right, were Muslim at that point. right? Like the sort of far right idea that like Muslims left Arabia and suddenly everybody had to convert, and they all did, and all at one go, is just not true, right? Because again, we can see this in the naming of places. We can see this in the fact of writing that tells us about people they lived alongside that were Zoroastrian, that were so. It's like the idea that they suddenly took over all of these places and everybody had to.
We need to start our story with Ali ibn Abi Talib, one of the most important people in the history of Islam. Ali was born in Mecca in the powerful Hashimi clan and was a cousin of the Muslim prophet Muhammad. They had a strong.
By the way, yes, when you hear the Hashimi, that later becomes the Hashemites. That is where that is the heritage that they claim.
As Ali's father had raised Muhammad when he became orphaned, and later Ali would live in Muhammad's household. When in 610 AD Muhammad proclaimed his prophethood, Ali was one of the first people to accept Islam and recognize Muhammad as the prophet. But
so, I'm actually glad that they started. I also really like how they incorporated I always find it a little weird though when people try to take the Roman alphabet and kind of make it look as though it's written whatever. Ali, right? Is an important figure because of that, being one of the early adopters of Islam and everything. But this is where the distinction begins to happen, right? Well, he might have been one of the first followers, right? But who deserves to be the next ruler of Makkah, right? And Medina, right? So
Muhammad's proselytizing was not initially popular among the polytheistic Meccans, and he and the early Muslims had been oppressed. The rumors of a plot against Muhammad were spreading, forcing him to leave Mecca for Medina with the majority of his followers in 622, which was called Hijrah, the migration, an event so.
And yeah, I was about to say, the Islamic calendar starts with, and the years are Hijri, right? So from the migration. It doesn't start with, some other, but I do like also that they have all of the names of different regions and areas and peoples, right? Because, like, you have Qalb, Tai, Bakr, Ibn Wa'il, Tamim, right? Al-Yamama, Al-Fa, right? Like, it's important because people often think that, like, Arabia's just one thing. I don't know how else to put it. It would be like looking at Germany and just only identifying it by way of Berlin. When people talk about something like the Arabian Peninsula or the subcontinent, right? Or Southeast Asia, many places. And they just define it by like, oh, Saigon is there, or oh, Mumbai is there, or oh, Dubai is there. You know what I mean? Like it's
momentous that the new Islamic calendar starts with that day. Initially, Ali stayed behind to return people the possessions they had entrusted upon the Prophet for safekeeping. But very soon he joined other Muslims in Medina, and in 623 married Muhammad's daughter Fatima Zahra, becoming one of the most trusted companions of Muhammad. Known in the Muslim.
And later on, Fatima, right? She is from whom the only Shia caliphate that ever existed was the Fatimid caliphate, and it's in the name. It's because they claim their heritage back through Fatima, back to the Prophet. Right. So, back to the Prophet Muhammad. So no Pax Arabica? Yeah. It's interesting how we've adopted that name that Europeans gave to entire... Yeah, because even when you have the initial Arab expansion out of Arabia and into what is North Africa, Ifriqiya only referred to a part of the coast that was essentially the coastline of Tunisia, what is now Tunisia, and part of Libya. And you had a difference too between Africa, right, and Mauritania and Ethiopia, Abyssinia, etc., right? But instead now it just becomes one. In the same way how like all of Asia has that name when it initially really only meant a certain part of Turkey, Anatolia. Hijra is etymologically related to Hagar, the mother of Ishmael. Oh, see, because she also would have been migrating, right, too, because she was cast out, right? That's fascinating. Thank you so much for that, Rook. That's very fascinating, actually. That actually adds even more meaning to that, precisely because of the fact that, like, the distinction, right, between claiming their descendant, the Arabs, as being the descendants of Ishmael, right, or Ismail, right, and that's why you have, and then you have Yitzchak, right, being the sort of progenitor of the Jewish people, right. It's an interesting thing. It's why once I pointed out that the word Ivrit, right, the word for Arabic and the word for Hebrew in Hebrew itself, right, the difference is literally one letter, like if you were to just switch the letters over, right, because it looks almost the same. It's almost spelled exactly the same, but it's just one little thing, right, that changes that relationship, right, because they both start with an ayin, right, because you have this in Arabic, we have al-Arabiya, right, and same thing with Ali, right, it's a different form as opposed to the sound, it's Ali, right, and so it's Arabiya. So in that same way, the ayin is also in the Hebrew, but the difference is whether it's bet resh or resh bet. That's literally all it is. Those two letters. If you just move them over, you are talking about Arabs, or you're talking about, I like how you can pronounce that. Oh, the ayin. Oh, thank you.
Community for wisdom and fairness, he earned the nickname Asad Allah, the Lion of God, for his military exploits and courage on the
Also, I love the calligraphy art that you have in Islam because there is also a like me growing up, I had seen the Jewish/Hebrew equivalent of it, and so I appreciated it already when I saw that. When I saw that Arabic stuff also too, like that to me meant so much, like seeing that the fact that in the same way that we don't do the whole graven images thing, and like so then there's like importance placed on the written word, in a way that's also very artful, right? It is artistic. It's
field. By 631, the Islamic community, the Ummah, had been able to assert control over Mecca.
By the way, this is an interesting thing, but they're actually the actual collective way of talking about the word Am Israel is often used to mean the nation of Israel. There is actually a Jewish term for that. And what is it? In Arabic, it's Ummah, right? In Hebrew, it's Ummah. That's the actual all Jewish people, like the actual nation of Israel, so to speak, right? The people of Israel, right? The Jewish people, right? It's the Ummah. It's not Am. Am is just to mean a large group, because I think it's in the book of Ezekiel that like bees are described as an Am, which if you were to take the Zionist sort of view of it, a nation of bees, which doesn't make any sense. So there already is another term, and it's Ummah. So you have Ummah in Arabic and Ummah in Hebrew.
And large swaths of the Arabian Peninsula, and was already a formidable force. But who was going to succeed aging Muhammad? And this is the root of the split in Islam. As one would expect, Sunni and Shia sources offer different interpretations. On the way back from his last pilgrimage, Muhammad gave a sermon at the Ghadir Qum oasis, took Ali by his hand, and proclaimed that anyone who has me as his mullah has Ali as his mullah. Shia theology believes that in Ghadir Qum, the Prophet designated Ali as his successor.
And again, there are people that Oh yeah, marhaba. Yeah. Yeah, not from. Is that a dig at Netanyahu? No, I'm just joking. Arabic is very interesting. Because that was one of the things too. Like when I also was introduced to Syriac, for like sort of religious study and like learning about all that, how it's all related. It was interesting to me to sort of, yeah, dig at Netanyahu, obviously. Who else could that be against? But this is where a lot of people, like, if once they get to know a little bit more about it, then they can sort of see where this contention arose, right? Because, again, you have this happening here, and it is, like Hebrew, there are a lot of words that, like, for example, like, Rav, right? We know that someone that's a Rav now is a rabbi. But when we say in Hebrew, Moshe Rabbeinu, right? That means more literally like our teacher, right? Because the rabbinate hadn't become a thing, right? And people know, oh, rabbi means teacher. Yes, but it also means rabbi because now that's a concept, right? So that's like one of those things, and that's not maybe that's not the best choice, but like that's one that at least you can see like different historical meanings, different, right? If it's applied in one way, but it's not applied for others, like, we wouldn't,
Calling him Mola, a polysemous Arabic word with several meanings, one of which is leader or master. Sunnis believe that the Ghadir Khumm episode was merely a proclamation of affinity of the Prophet to his loyal companion and son-in-law, and interpret the word Mola using its second definition, a friend. Another important episode,
which, you can see, because it can mean leader, because it can mean master, the secondary one, like, if the Prophet Muhammad, right, is saying that, this is how I've heard some people sort of try to work through this. Why would he not use the first meaning as opposed to saying, right, like the onus should be on why would it mean friend as opposed to master or etc. And and instead what we have to do is look contextually, right, at other times when that term is used. And some people come to the conclusion that because typically that term was used to mean leader, that it must have meant leader, right? And therefore the Shia claim to it is correct. But again, that's not me saying that thing. Like, this is how some people have tried to argue from a theological perspective, looking at the context of the period, that then try to say that yes, this is how, like, excuse me, like the assumptions that you like, there are more assumptions to believe that it's friend than there are to believe it's master or leader, right? Which, en español decimos Mahoma por alguna razón. Sí. Right, exactly.
in the succession dispute between the Sunni and Shia theologies is connected to the so-called pen and paper episode. This is considered a genuine hadith, as both Sunni and Shia theologians accept it, but interpret it differently.
So one thing I've always found interesting, like, especially because like a lot of Christians try to like be, when it comes to like to the hadith, right? They like to say, oh, it's not, like, essentially they act like it was just something that was just like invented like whenever. But the whole point of whether it's an accepted hadith or not actually has to go through a process of essentially a genealogy. Right? It has to go back to a genealogy. It has to go back to reputable sources, right? That precedes sort of modern citation, right? But it sort of speaks to the importance that was placed on the accuracy of what was said, right? Because this is something that I was actually reading, about, and the book's title's escaping me right now, but it was just a few months ago, and it essentially goes into how in depth the research into figuring out whether a hadith is accepted or not is, and what you do when you have hadith that are essentially the same hadith, but it has slightly different changes to it, right? Like, how will they consolidate? How will they do this, right? It's actually very fascinating to talk about. The Arabic equivalent of Am is the name Amman. Yeah. Yeah. It's the reason why, like, I never understood why. Because, see, in the Sephardic world, right, like, in Sephardic culture, I'm not going to say, like, right now as it exists now, because, you know, but, like, even growing up, like, I would hear the term Ummah. Like, that wasn't seen as strange. Like, and I knew of the Arabic word Ummah, but it meant, in my mind, and still to this day, it means the same concept. Right? It makes sense. It's only when you want to distinguish that it's a group. Right? Hello, Thassi. It's good to see you. It's only when you want to try to distinguish that Am is only applied to the Jewish people that you use Am. But again, if you know Hebrew and you read the Tanakh, it's in the book of Ezekiel. Yes, Hekiel, right? There it says, it talks about bees have it being an Am. And I'm like, well, bugs can't have a nation because they have no concept of nationhood. Right? There are other things too, even objects, if I remember correctly. Even in Devarim and stuff like that, right? Where it's explicitly not used to describe. Right? It instead means a group. So, in the Zionist sort of thought process, the decision to use Am is because there was times when the word Am was used to talk about a group of people that was more or less exclusive to people that were Jewish, right? Or that would become Jewish, you know, historically speaking, right? But to me, the idea of Ummah and Ummah being, you know, coextensive terms as well, in terms of like what they're trying to describe, makes more sense to me, right? But what do I know? Reinterpretations occur even if the Bible and the Old and New Testaments, much of the context of the original intent of what was written as lost happens on Twitter too, right? But like one thing too is like, this is the reason why it's strange to me that Christians are so adamant in like the idea of there being a written and an oral Torah. It's something that we know goes back, like I'll put it to you like this, right? Jesus himself references people who are foundational to the Talmud. You know what I mean? Like people, like he references Rabbi Hillel and Rabbi Gamaliel, right? They're in the Talmud. You know what I mean? Like this is the problem I have with the people that try to see it as though you have to completely reject the idea that there was an oral tradition that was people in the way how people know it, right? Was different rabbis trying to. You can read the different disputes people have. I don't know why people think that it's like a novel and they're telling you prescriptively what you're supposed to do, but that's what you're really getting when you study Talmud, right? And that's the thing, is like the idea of there being an exegetical tradition, right, makes sense. like even with things like stuff that's pertaining to, I mean, like I just think of like the Upanishads, I think of the Pali Canon, like I think of all these other things where like every single thing is like everyone else gets to have an exegetical tradition except for us, right? Because ours is the one that yes, we take it super literally, and it's like no, it's people trying to work through, right, the Mishnayos, right, which it literally means Mishnah, which means two. Yeah, the Jesus cinematic universe, exactly, right? But in this case, right, like Mishnah means to repeat, right? Like that's what it means to like remember, right? It's the and so that's what you learn when you're in Cheder, right? When you're in Yeshiva Katan, you learn Mishnayos. Then later on you learn Gemara, which is the commentaries on the Mishnayos, right? So that's why it never really worked for me to like the way in which it's framed as this like isolated thing or something that is not attached to it. Oh, thank you so much for lurking, Nightingale. So, that's one of the reasons why I just kind of never really and the only other people they do this with are Muslims, where they try to deny the legitimacy of their exegetical tradition. Right? I don't know what it is, but
In Islam, a hadith is a story on the life of Muhammad with religious and legal messages for the Muslim community. And according to this one,
this is a very basic question that may not have an answer, but what is the best way to study understand religions we don't have a lot of context of? Does anyone write guides from a secular perspective? Yeah, there is. So depending on, I can actually, if I think I remember that you're in the Discord. I took a break, so I kind of that it'd be out of my mind. But if you look at, gosh, what's the name of the book? There are two books that come to mind. One of them is literally titled Shia Islam. I mean, that's a particular one, but it's an academic book, and it does it from scholars of it, right, that are not necessarily Muslims, right, secular scholars, that look into the history, but do delve into things like that. And there's the other book, gosh, for the life of me, I can't remember the title. But there are books that are written from an academic perspective, right, that are good introductions, and it's not dense, hyper-specialized material. This is meant for a more general audience, right? But they're written by academics precisely because, they cite, there are people that know imams, right? There are people that they study particular sects of Islam, particular, etc. So that's why one of them. In fact, there was even one recently that was like a biography of the Prophet Muhammad, and it was written by I recently recommended it to someone, but I also can't remember the name of the author. But they did like a Marxist reading of, like a Marxist analysis, like from a Marxist perspective in terms of lens of understanding the Prophet Muhammad, and I thought it was fascinating. It's literally just called Muhammad. Like that's one of the reasons why it's very hard for me to even think of the author, because I'm so used to just referring to it. Oh, it's the Muhammad book. Who is the publisher of that book? Trying to Google. Yeah, let me see if I can find it actually. Because I might be able to find it. Just 1 second. Yeah, so there's the Quran by Michael Cook. That's a very short introduction, and then also Islam by John Tolan is good. I think it's this one. Yeah, it's called An Introduction to Islam. I'll put it in the I'll put it in chat in just a second. Just give me a second. There's so much misinfo about Islam. Every time I try to study it, I either get Islamophobic propaganda or asked to convert, depending on who I'm talking to. Yeah, the first one is Shia Islam. I'm trying to find that one too. But Introduction to Islam, that's the one I would recommend first. But I do know that there is one that's... oh, here it is. Here's the first one that I mentioned, the one about Shia Islam. That's the one. That exact edition is the one I have. Like, if I could go grab it, I would, but it's not here. But I also had an argument with someone who wasn't aware of their own Islamophobia. They told me something about Muhammad marrying a girl that was, oh, yeah, they always want to, it's always when it comes to the question of Aisha, but, I don't want to get too in-depth on it because, like, there are some people that, say whether that even, like, the framing of that event or what it was or what it could be, it's like I've heard people try to argue it from the, what did it mean at the time, also to sort of going into, like, well, if we count, like, to me, it's not even that big an important thing, right? In terms of, like, the theology, right? Because it's like, well, 7th century Arabia, why are we going to, etc. But still, yeah, I don't know where they get that from, but it's an obsession with trying to somehow equate. Well, I mean, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, right? Where they try to make, like, leftist organizations seem inherently criminal. People try to make other religions, right? The ones that, to make them seem as inherently criminal as well, right? Inherently negative. Every time I hear about that girl, she gets younger. Yeah, no, I know. That's what I'm saying. Like, that's why some scholars have gone one route, some scholars have gone another route. Like, oh, actually, if you count this, blah, 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 it actually shows she was 19 when they got married or whatever. But to some extent, it's like the people for whom they're doing that for, to a great extent, are not the ones that are going to be reading the books that, the parts of the books that go into that contention, right? So,
a few days before his death, Muhammad asked his companions to bring him pen and paper so that he could write a statement in order to prevent the Ummah from going astray after his death. But one of Muhammad's closest companions, Umar, said, "The Prophet is seriously ill, and we have got Allah's book with us, and that is sufficient for us." This led to a loud dispute in the room in the presence of Muhammad, who got unhappy and called everyone to leave. It is still unclear what the Prophet wanted to write. Shias claim that he intended to designate Ali as his successor, but there's no way to determine this.
Also, it's interesting because the pen and paper incident is also why some people are what are called Quranists, right? Where they don't accept the hadith at all. They operate under no hadith, right? That all you need is just the Quran. Right? That's all you would do. Right? So, in fact, there's one YouTuber that I like sometimes because I'll watch, stuff that's, lectures or stuff that I, quite boring. I literally like to watch lectures on YouTube, but history lectures. Guy who's like kind of like a known Quranist, like that's like one of his big things. But issue is he's one of like the debate bro types, which I, like if it was him going into this, Quranist theology and Quranist, I would find it a bit more. I don't like online debates. I'll just be blunt about that.
According to Sunnis, the Prophet did not explicitly designate a successor and left it for the Islamic community to decide. There are other events which Sunnis and Shia base their claims on regarding the succession, but in short, following Muhammad's death in 632, the Ummah did not have a consensus on a new leader. While Ali took charge of the arrangements of the funeral, a meeting to decide the successor took place in Medina. Ali and two other prominent companions of the Prophet, Abu Bakr and Umar, were not present, and deliberations took place without them. In fact, the majority of those present were the Muslims residing in Medina, who welcomed Muhammad or were converted later, while very few of those who went on a hijrah from Mecca to Medina with Muhammad were there. Abu Bakr and Umar rushed to the meeting and took charge of the process in Ali's absence. The former was one of the first converts to Islam, Muhammad's father-in-law through his daughter Aisha. Deeply respected by modern Sunnis, he was very rich and contributed a lot to the cause of Islam and was arguably one of the main contenders for leadership. Umar was also a close companion of Muhammad, also his father-in-law through his...
So, yeah, again, close companion, father-in-law through... you have Khadija, and then Fatima, right, which is where you get the Fatimids from. It's just that there are people that do say, right, well, it seems as though because Ali wasn't present, that some say, and therefore he couldn't have been the, or the other, or they'll take the exact opposite side, the diametrically opposite side, that actually it was because they held the election without Ali there that Ali wasn't chosen by the Ummah. If you aren't on when I finish with ballet, thanks for the stream and have a wonderful rest of it. Thank you, you as well. Thank you. Hope your ballet goes well.
His daughter Hafsa, known for his zealous protection of the Prophet. He is known as a just, intelligent and wise person in the Sunni tradition. After a heated debate, Umar was able to persuade those present to choose Abu Bakr as the successor, the Caliph, a ruler of the Muslim Ummah. Ali was later presented with the fact of succession, and along with a number of other companions, initially refused to accept the decision as it was taken without him.
Right, so this is the part that I'm saying, like, this is why some people say, oh, the election was illegitimate because he wasn't able, one, to participate, and two, wasn't able to even be present, right? Like, he wasn't able to be considered, really, but he also couldn't even be there to, partake in the discussions that led to the election of Abu Bakr, right? So,
was one of the strongest candidates. Umar embarked on the process of persuading or forcing the companions to offer fealty to Abu Bakr. He personally came to Ali's house to persuade him. The events which followed have been the subject of much dispute, as the Sunnis believe that Umar was able to peacefully persuade Ali to recognize Abu Bakr's caliphate. According to Shia sources, Umar forced Ali to concede by breaking into the house and slamming the door, which broke Ali's wife Fatima Zahra's ribs, eventually leading to the miscarriage of their child. Ali himself was tied with a rope to force his allegiance. It is impossible to verify what really happened, but eventually Ali accepted.
And this is one of the things too. We don't know. There is the issue is that there's very scant evidence either side. Right? Because Ali didn't write, oh, I accept and faithfully blah 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 right away, obviously. Right? But also the fact that they did force people, right, into accepting it, right? That's something they even mentioned earlier, right? Is a reason why some people say, well, that they could have done that to Ali, who could have possibly had a schism. I mean, as it ended up happening, right? With Shia Islam, right? Is like one of those things. And again, it's one of those things that still, right, when it comes to even as far back as in the 7th century, that is still one of those things that unless we have good documentary or archaeological or etc. evidence for it, it's very difficult to come down one way or the other, right? We just have two different traditions. But the fact that there was, you really do have Ali saying, I wasn't able to, I was taking care of the funeral of the Prophet, right? So I wasn't present, couldn't partake in it, and also wasn't able to try to convince people one way or the other. The fact that they did try to force people in Medina, right, to choose, right, to submit to Abu Bakr's caliphate, then it raises enough questions that, it's still hard to come down because we just don't have the or space fillers or time travel there, right? Exactly.
Abu Bakr and his successor Umar as caliphs and retired from public life. He was often consulted in matters of state. Ali accepted the selection of Umar as caliph and even gave one of his daughters, Kulthum, to him in marriage. After the death of Umar in 644, Ali was considered for the position, but eventually another companion of Muhammad, Uthman of the Banu Umayyah clan, became the new caliph. Again, Ali recognized the new caliph, but very soon discontent in the caliphate grew. Again, the sources do not agree on the reasons, but many claimed that Uthman's nepotism and leniency towards tribal rivalries were the cause of the opposition against him.
And again, one thing to also keep in mind is not all of the people had converted to Islam. Not everybody that's here under the caliphate is, everybody's Muslim now, right? It just is not how that works. So if he did have leniency towards certain clans or tribes from winning or getting, whatever, it's that was something that would have already pre-existed, right? The fact that, whether or not those nepotism claims are true or not, we we only have whatever is the documentary evidence of the time. And that's why it's very difficult to come down one way or the other, because you can see parts of this being the case or parts of that being the case. The problem is theology doesn't really need that, right? When it comes to like questions of belief. So it's one of those things that it's still one of those things that historians are still working through. Some come down with the evidence for the former, some for the latter. But the idea of like tribal rivalries causing opposition to Uthman isn't that strange, considering, times prior, right? Because it was different clans and tribes that, for example, made the Prophet himself, right, have to go to Medina, right? So it's why it's plausible.
Rebels offered to support Ali as an alternative to Uthman, but Ali refused and even sent his sons, Hassan and Hussein, to protect Uthman's house, where eventually, despite all the protection, Uthman was assassinated by rebels from Egypt in 656. Finally, Ali's turn to become a caliph came,
and this is the thing, right? The rebels from Egypt, right? All of Egypt hadn't been converted, but the amount of people that were in Egypt, they wanted this is the thing. This is factionalism, right? As it extends out. And so this is why there are some people that I don't really know enough vis-a-vis the scholar literature on it. But it is an interesting contention, I think, regardless, that like that's one of the reasons why the Fatimids, right? Even though they started in Ifriqiya, so in Tunisia, right? That they eventually made the capital of their caliphate Cairo, right? To sort of honor the Egyptian faction that, would have otherwise perhaps have convinced Ali to be the caliph instead of Uthman, right?
he became the fourth and last of the Rashidun caliphs. But his election was not smooth, and he became a caliph amidst very tumultuous times. The Prophet's wife Aisha and Uthman's relatives from the Banu Umayyah clan, including the governor of Syria, Muawiyah, demanded that Ali punish the plotters of Uthman's death. But since some of them were Ali's supporters, the new caliph rejected.
Again, this speaks to this, right? Like, why did they choose Al-Qahira, right? Why did they choose Al-Qahira to be the capital of the Fatimid Caliphate? Really, it was because essentially it was one of the most important cities in the Islamic world and in the world in general, regardless, right? But whether it was done because they were, Ali's supporters and blah blah blah, right? It's difficult to come down fully one way or the other, being open to the idea that it could be the other side.
This, and soon the first Muslim civil war, called Fitna, started. In December 656, Ali's army defeated the rebels at the Battle of Camel near Basra, but Muawiyah still refused to accept Ali as a new caliph, and the anti-Ali opposition gathered around him. Ali was willing to not repeat Uthman's mistakes, and carried out measures to centralize the caliphate and decrease the power of governors. The two men...
And again, this is something that does happen a lot when you have these, like this part of Islamic history, like this split into the domains of Ali and then the domains of Muawiyah, right? Like they're never mentioned, right? You just get, and then this happened, and now there are two sects, right? But if you were to do this when it comes to Christian history, you best believe that you're gonna get, But regardless, one of the things obviously that Ali wanted to do was to try to reduce the ability for, and this is something that they said like he learned from Persians, right? Was that they needed to have a better bureaucracy, essentially a better central form of government, precisely because of the fact that by having it as dispersed as it was, you could have something like what happened with Uthman and the people in Egypt, right, or people in Samarkand or wherever.
Assembled their armies and confronted each other at Siffin on the Euphrates in 657. Neither side was keen to commit to a major battle, but after 3 months of occasional skirmishes, when serious fighting finally broke out, Muawiyah's followers called for an arbitration, apparently riding out with copies of the Quran on their lances to bring the conflict to a stop. Ali was forced to agree, but some of his followers objected and abandoned him. They became known as the Kharijis, from the Arabic verb kharaja, to leave, because they left Ali's army. According to the arbitration, which took place at Adrur in 658 or 659, it was ruled that both Ali and Muawiyah should relinquish their claims, and the Muslim Ummah should have a chance to choose their own ruler. Ali rejected this ruling, and the stalemate continued as Muawiyah's supporters proclaimed him a caliph in Damascus in 660. The following year, Ali was assassinated by the Kharijis while praying in the mosque at Kufa. Ali's son Hassan...
And this is why, again, this is why Kufa, right? This is why Kufa and I just said it like 20 minutes ago, I swear. Karbala are very big, important sites for Shia Islam, right? And that's also another thing too, is it's also why the majority of people in Iraq are Shia Muslims, right? Have you ever? Yes. Justin, right? Justin, yeah. Esoterica, yeah, I have. I know that he was fired recently. Not recently, I should say. And it's very unfortunate because academia. But anyway.
And was proclaimed a new caliph in Kufa, which became the capital during Ali's short reign. But Muawiyah had a far stronger army. Thus Hassan stepped down as a caliph in order to...
And when I say academia, what I mean is like, there are so many good people that do not deserve to be out of a job that unfortunately are. Like someone like Justin.
Avoid further bloodshed, and a treaty between the sides was signed. According to the treaty, Hassan accepted Muawiyah as a caliph under the condition that he would act in accordance with Islam. Muawiyah would not appoint a successor, and a new caliph should be elected by the Electoral Council, Shura.
And this is why, like, when they try to say, oh, I think it's funny because you'll often hear Shura Council, right? But Shura means council. But yes, elections. Who would have thought, right?
Muawiyah would abandon cursing Ali and persecuting Ali's family and...
Oh my gosh, one thing though is that you do have, this is something, again, it's a theological thing, so I'm not, is that you do have people that are Shia, that will curse, like Abu Bakr and others, like I forget exactly, or maybe it's Uthman, I can't remember, but there actually is like a specific thing they will say, precisely because of this schism, right?
Supporters. But Muawiyah would not stay true to his pledges, and towards the end of his reign, he designated his son Yazid as a successor. This would be...
See, this is the issue when you have the name Yazid, and people overly wanting to read between the lines in that when it comes to other things, but this is where we start to get what will then lead to Karbala, which is like the fracturing that really just...
breaking off the tradition of the Islamic Caliphate as a state, which elected its leader through consultation or election, to a monarchy. Muawiyah summoned the Shura in Damascus, the new capital of the Caliphate, and through persuasion and bribery was able to secure support for Yazid. This development caused significant opposition in different quarters, and this opposition started gathering around Muhammad's grandson and Ali's son.
It's fun how humans are still giving their kids the same names after thousands of years. I mean, like, yeah, I know. I mean, like, one thing, if you are given a secular name and you're Jewish, you will also get a Hebrew name. And it's like, this name is supposed to connect you to some ancient, thing. But it's, it's like, oh, it's actually your grandpa's name, right?
Hussein, who replaced Hassan, who passed away in 670, as the leader. Despite...
Yes, like this is Hassan 205,908.
The opposition, Muawiyah was able to secure the support of Mecca and Medina for Yazid. Ali's capital Kufa was the potential stronghold of the opposition, and the death of Muawiyah in 680 put events which would further divide the Islamic world into action.
And this is what leads to the Battle of Karbala. This is why Karbala and Kufa are the two very important sites. Like, people have probably seen pictures of them, because I think it's Kufa. Like, it's like this golden dome there, and it's very beautiful. The only other place that's similar to it is Qom in Iran itself, but...
Following Muawiyah's death, Yazid became the new caliph and immediately demanded allegiance of Hussein. Yazid's envoy could not persuade Hussein to do this and was afraid of killing him, since Hussein was the Prophet's grandson. Around the same time, the people of the city of Kufa started sending letters to Hussein informing him about their opposition to the Umayyad rule, their support for him, and intention to remove Yazid from power and
you can tap into the abilities of all other people with that name. It's like an avatar state. Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what's funny though is that it's like I actually have a picture, a color photograph of the Shrine of the Rock, or Dome of the Rock, I should say, right in Palestine, right? Very much more recent than people think. Before they put the gold plating on it, because before, like the Al-Aqsa Mosque, right, which has like a dark charcoal gray color for its domes, it used to have a dark dome too. But it was only the Jordanians that decided that they wanted to, once it was under their control, right after 1948, did they decide to have it, like I said, covered in gold. So
install him instead. The Kufans sided with Ali during the first fitna, continued to support his family by backing Hassan, and were unhappy when he abdicated in favor of Muawiyah. Hussein accepted this call and sent his cousin Muslim ibn Aqil to Kufa to assess the situation and gather support. Initially, Muslim ibn Aqil was very successful, and he informed Hussein of his progress. Yazid was forced to change the governor of Kufa to defeat the opposition in the city, and the new governor succeeded in doing just that. With support dwindling, Muslim ibn Aqil decided to carry out a revolt before Hussein's arrival, but it was defeated. Hussein did not know about this, and in September of 680 started his journey towards Kufa with around 50 men and his family members. On the way, Hussein received information about the death of Muslim ibn Aqil and the defeat of the revolt in Kufa. He called on those who joined him on the way to leave, understanding the futility of his attempt to challenge Yazid.
There is a lot of stuff. In fact, I remember, because I actually have a whole book that it's, but it's actually like written by theologians. So make of that what you will. Where it does talk about like that Ali told them to leave because he knew that he had to go, but that it would ultimately lead to his death. Right? Like there's this, right? It's like he had a premonition, right? But in many ways, it's also given a lot of religious significance in Shia Islam because of what does happen. What does happen at Karbala, right?
Pretty soon, Yazid's forces confronted Hussein, and an envoy of Kufa's new governor told Hussein to come with him or turn back and go anywhere but Medina. Hussein refused and continued on his path with the envoy's forces accompanying him. On the 2nd of October, Hussein reached Karbala and set camp there. On the following day, Yazid sent an additional 4,000 men to confront Hussein. The Umayyad army had orders to prevent Hussein's men from accessing the Euphrates River in order to force them to concede due to lack of water. But 3 days later, Hussein's group was able to access water, creating a stalemate. For over a week, Yazid's officials had tried to persuade Hussein to accept his fate and pledge...
And what I mean by alone, because I realized that people say, oh, well, there's all these people with him, right? I mean that the family and stuff, to have them leave.
Allegiance to Yazid, since they understood the consequences of attacking the Prophet's grandson. Ultimately, Hussein refused the offers of Yazid, and on the 10th of October, the Umayyad army approached Hussein's camp, and both sides took their battle positions. Hussein's companions fought valiantly, but the forces were extremely uneven. He and his men were massacred. This included 7 sons of Ali, including Hussein himself, 2 of Hussein's sons, 3 sons of his brother Hassan, and the other grandchildren of Ali. Many from the Prophet's family were killed.
And again, remember, he's the grandchild of the Prophet Muhammad. He's the grandchild of the Prophet Muhammad. So these are other grandchildren, great-grandchildren, right? Like, that also were So this is why it's such a traumatic event, and why it's one of those focal points in Shia history that's like, yeah, this is why so much is written about Karbala and its importance, right? Because of what it meant, right? Like what Yazid brought about, right? So
this was a final straw, completing the schism in the Islamic world and dividing it into Sunni and Shia. The process, which started with the dispute over succession to Muhammad and continued with the killing of Ali and Hussein, caused the split of Islam, with Shi'at Ali, Ali's party, first becoming a political movement within Islam and later transforming into...
But yeah, Shi'at Ali, followers of Ali, are the movement of Ali. And this is why a lot of the art that you see, the calligraphy art, word art, often shows a lion. I think it's a lion. But because I've also seen one for the Ismailis, and theirs, I think, is a tiger. So.
To a branch of Islam, offering alternative interpretation of the Quran and Hadiths, its own view on Islamic jurisprudence, on state and some religious practices, venerating the people of the house.
I was about to say Ahl al-Bayt, yeah. Which is the direct descent, yeah.
Bayt, Muhammad's direct descendants as his righteous successors. The Sunni, also known as the people of the Sunnah and the community, al-Sunnah wa al-Jama, remained the majority in Islam. And although naturally there has been some transformation in Sunni Islam in comparison with early Islam, coming with new times and different interpretations of holy texts by Sunni scholars, the main distinctions between the two largest branches of Islam go back to the events we have described above. And while Sunni theology respects the Ahl al-Bayt as well, it rejects the premise that the Islamic Ummah should be ruled by the Ahl al-Bayt.
Right, because that's the difference, right? Who should rule over, who should be the caliph, right? Because if you choose one, if you say the Ahl al-Bayt is what is to be foregrounded, that would mean the descendants of the Prophet Muhammad, right? So that would mean Ali should have been the first caliph, right? He was. But if although they say we venerate the Ahl al-Bayt, they say, however, it doesn't require. This is why the Fatimid, right? The Fatimid Caliphate. That's why they, being Shia, they used their descendant, the fact that they were the descendants by way of Fatima, hence Fatimid Caliphate, right, as the reason why they were they had to gain legitimacy for their caliphate. Right? So it started off with who should succeed the Prophet Muhammad, right, and now it's who should succeed, like, in the idea of succession as such, right? And whether there is the importance of the Ahl al-Bayt, right, the descendants, the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, or if it could be companions that weren't family, like Uthman, for example.
The killing of Ali, the massacre of Hussein, his family members and companions, strengthened the sense of injustice against the Prophet's family among the Shia Muslims, and turned martyrdom into one of its main pillars. Ali's martyrdom during the prayer, Hussein's martyrdom during the struggle against the perceived tyrant and usurper, turned into a powerful symbol of Shia Islam. The first month of the Muslim calendar, Muharram, is the annual period of mourning for the Shia Muslims, with the 10th of Muharram, known as Ashura, the day of the...
Yeah, so the one of the books that I had was talking about just this one day, right? The 10th of Muharram, right? Ashura, right? Because that's the day the Battle of Karbala took place. And it's like, so much has been written about just this one singular event because of how important it was. And it was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, right? Like, after this, the split was done, right? Like, whatever salvaging that could have been done by Yazid. And there's an issue because some people often confuse the Yazidis, right, the people that were the followers of Yazid, with the people group, the Yazidis, right? Much more complex than that, right? Because typically it's Sunni people that go after, it's not Shia people that go after Yazidis. So there's a lot that I could talk about in that, but it's different. It's a religious thing. It's not just a religious difference thing. So I know people, like, if you ever kept up with like the news of like ISIS/ISIL, right? That was one of the things that they did. They went against the Yazidis, but it's different from the Yazidis of Yazid, right? Or Yazid, as they said it earlier.
Battle of Karbala becoming the peak day of mourning ceremonies. Millions of devoted Shias make the Arba'in pilgrimage on foot to the holy shrine of Imam Hussein in Karbala every year. The Shia defeat in the Battle of Karbala did not stop the supporters of the al-Bayt from opposing.
Oh my gosh. I mean, look, I know it's not majority, but it's kind of weird to not include. Like, there are people that are still Muslim in the state of Israel. Like, come on. Okay, whatever.
Existing state of affairs in the Islamic world. Dissenters to the existing.
Yeah, and so this is one of the things, right? This is why. So you see the two rivers, right? The Tigris and the Euphrates, and then you have the border with Iran here on this right hand side over here of Iraq, right? So most of the Iran-Iraq war was fought just here. Like, at one point, the Iranians did take over this peninsula over here. But it didn't work out. And same thing here, right? You have Kurds, which tend to be Sunni. I thought there aren't Shia Kurds, but most of them. And then you have the Azeris, right? Like the president and the current Ayatollah, even Mojtaba and his father are Azeri. They're from the Azeri ethnicity minority in Iran. So, but it's also Shia.
State of affairs in Islam would take up the flag of the party of Ali and challenge the rule of the caliphate. Numerous powerful states and dynasties, such as the Fatimids, Buyid, Nizaris, Safavids, and others, emerged throughout the Islamic world, armed with the powerful idea of Shia Islam.
Yeah, but here is the Bahmanis. And you now have this, actually, interestingly enough, in the northern part of right, where now you have the Houthis, right? But yeah, so there were all these other states that took up the mantle of.
In our episode on the Hashashins, link to which is in the description and pinned comment, you can learn about.
Also, what this third color here is Izibadi Islam, which is a very distinct form of Islam that developed, really only in Oman, right? Like, now there's like a diaspora because Oman had its own empire, right? That included the lands of the Hormuz all the way down to Tanzania. In fact, the Zanzibar was where famously the Omani Empire went to. So let's see here. Hello, Nightingale. Are you Jewish? Yes. Is that an issue? My older brother has the same name as my father, his father, and so I'm lucky enough to be the second son. He gave me a more creative name. Yeah, like, I mean, it's just one of those. Well, see, like, that's an interesting thing too, because I've mentioned, like, in Jewish tradition, right? If you're Ashkenazi, you could never be named after your father. That's considered like, no, you're not supposed to do that. You can only get the names of people that have already passed, right? In Ashkenazi culture. In Sephardic culture, we don't have that rule at all, right? What usually happens is that most people have, like, more or less speaking, two first names, right, so to speak, right? Or you could think of it as a first name and a middle name, I guess. And often you'll get one of those names from, like, your father or your grandfather. Like you'll get one of them, but you'll get one that's different, right? But it's still usually like, oh, your uncle had this name, right? Like, but you won't just get a recapitulation of the father's name or something. But you can, technically, if Sephardic. In Chile, we have the two first names. Right, exactly. Because, like, 2 names and 2 last names, right? And that's a bit different, but still, when it comes to the Jewish thing, like the 2 names is like, I'm trying to think, like can't remember what his second name. Oh, like for example, there's a Rebbe, very famous worldwide, right? Kind of, he had his own messianic movement, sort of. It's still apparently Jewish, but you know, the point is that they sort of see him as being a kind of messianic-ish figure to some extent, and his name was Menachem Mendel, right? So Menachem Mendel, and then Schneerson, right? So you'll have that Menachem Mendel, and so a lot of people will either in that movement they will call their sons Mendel or Menachem Mendel, named after him, because he's not really, he's already passed, and also like he's not part of their family. So you're cracking. Okay, let's see here. My last name is kind of weird. I would rather you not post it in chat. I'll just tell you that right now. No need to do such a thing. I know a lot of people whose names have changed because of immigration, etc. But it's weird when because of immigration, they decide to change your entire name, right? So that it's almost incomprehensible to a whole bunch of people. So. Okay, well, for everybody on the, because they can be Jewish or, I see, okay. I see. Okay, everyone. Oh, I think I know what name it is. I seem to thinking like, anyway, I think I know what it is. I'm almost certain I know what it is. So anyway, with that being said, those of us, those on the Twitch side, we are going to raid Peacefire now. If everybody could please make sure to tell Peacefire now hello for me, and that I sent you over. I very much appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining me for today's stream. I will see you all later. Yeah, mentally doxed. Anyway, see you all soon. Take care. Okay, for those of you on the YouTube side, since I can't raid out just yet, don't have enough subscribers for that. I'm just gonna suggest that you go to a stream that's of your favorites. Again, I can't raid out yet, so I will see you all later, and I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. See you all soon.